Right, good morning. Test Jan. Jan? Testing 1, 2, 1, 2. Good morning, everybody. Let's take up our seats. Righto, let's settle down and let's start a great event. You will have ample time still to visit the communication desks and the exhibitions. So please, let's settle down. Thank you very much. There we go. So good morning, everybody. Welcome here at the year-end celebrations, today the 3rd of December 2024. We've been looking forward to spending some time with you. And most important of all, we're being hosted today by the Southern African Association of Freight Forwarders. Thank you, Dr. Unita, for supporting us and always being willing to, sponsor this event. We really appreciate that. And we're very proud in being associated with the SAF brand. Thank you very much for that. We really appreciate that. So, ladies and gents, just a little bit of housekeeping. The ladies and gents, should you exit the door here and you walk slight to your right, straight on, the restrooms will be on your right-hand side. So you're welcome to leave at any time, and and then we can continue with the event. So, ladies and gents, today will not be a death by PowerPoint. We're only going to have 1 or 2 PowerPoints at the beginning of the event. Thereafter, we will have panel discussions, and we're going to embark on very, very informative discussions, and we've got excellent panelists here with us today. But our MC for today, Devla Naidu, is going to tell you a little bit more about that, and I'll proudly hand over to him soonest. So my job is just to do a little bit housekeeping. So looking at our program, you can see our program, we're going to, sorry, I can just get it here in front of me. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to our valued sponsors and associates of the Transport Forum, those who exhibited here today. And we're going to talk, walk to them and give them the microphone, have the camera on them, and they can tell a little bit more about what they're exhibiting and who they are. A lot of fun usually. And then after that, you're going to be handed over to our MC. Ladies and gents, obviously you've noticed that all the events of the Transport Forum are complimentary to the public, and that's why we have valued sponsors and associates to the Transport Forum to make this possible. So you can see the program there. We're going to have the first panel discussion at about 9:40. Then we'll have a break where you can again visit the exhibitions. Thereafter, you will see we will have the second panel discussion. And then after that, the Q&A, and obviously our MC will properly introduce you to that. Where I want to get to is that we will have a 12:30 lunch, and you can visit again the exhibitions. And you can see at the end of the event, there's going to be a fun quiz, lots of fun. And at the end of the event, many lucky draws. And you can see a lot of lucky draws already here at the front. I see there's a Logic, kind of a box fan. There's from a Transport Forum and sponsors, there's a microwave oven. You might be the lucky winner of the microwave oven. You see there's nice draws from Road Freight Association, and more will be added here as we go along. So at the end of the event, you might be the lucky winner of one of these prizes. So very much worth your while to stay to the end, besides the excellent program. All right, so that's great. And then also I want to thank, we've got beautiful 2 singers here today. Elise Marie and Jardine van Jaarsveld. Thank you very much for blessing us with your beautiful voices and music. In fact, they're the wife and daughter of Jan sitting there, our technical assistant. So Jan, also thank you very much for bringing your family here. I really appreciate that, but they've got a full-time music ministry and they're blessing us today. So thanks for them, and we will obviously hear more of them during this morning. So thank you very much, Elise Marie and Jardine. We're enjoying the music very much. So ladies and gents, I'm going to grab the camera now, and then I'm going to walk through our panelists, our exhibitions, and going to give them some opportunity to introduce them, yourself to them. Thank you. There's 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah. There we go. Jan, just bring the volume down a little bit of this microphone. Testing 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, Jan. 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. Here we have University of Johannesburg.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So my colleague and I, we are from University of Johannesburg. We're representing the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management. We offer courses from bridging right up until PhD qualifications, which is NQF level 5 to NQF 10. This year, we've also launched our supply chain podcast lab. So please come to our stand and visit us, and we can get more information. We also will be doing a lucky draw at the end of the event. So we have a box here for your business cards. Thank you.
Let's give them a hand. University of Johannesburg, gold sponsor. Road Freight Association.
Good morning, folks. Great to see you all here. Just remember, everything you're eating came by truck. Hope you have a great day. And you should know what the Road Freight Association is about. We push everything from rail to road. I mean, we move most of the goods around the country by road. We also have been saying very clearly to the Ministry of Transport that rail needs to play its game. It needs to carry its fair share of load. Got some ladies manning the stall today. Please come and chat to them, and we look forward to interacting with you. Thank you.
Thank you, RFA. In Control.
Hi, so I'm Leanne from In Control. This is Antoinette. We do a TMS software solution. So we help companies manage their fleet digitally. So staging jobs to your driver without your driver having to come through to the office, doing the daily checklists on their devices, as well as RTMS. So we assist companies to not only tick box RTMS, but to have the software behind it in order to live and get benefit from the RTMS. You're welcome to visit our stand to find out more.
Thank you, In Control, gold sponsor. Another gold sponsor, Easy Clear.
Thank you, Harry. Morning, everybody. Gavin, some of that food that we're eating that came on your trucks was probably cleared by agents using Easy Clear. So please, folks, you're welcome to come and visit our stand. We produce or provide software as a service solutions to the freight forwarding, clearing, logistics supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right, Internet of Things integration.
Hello, everybody. It's Norman Parkin from IoTI here. We're a hardware supplier for in-vehicle management, asset management, driver compliance management. So we help the tracking companies and trucking companies to manage their drivers better and ensure that they deliver a good service to their customers with our various asset tracking technologies. Please come and visit us here at our stand, and we'll show you a little bit about our hardware that we have. Thanks.
Thank you, IoTI. South African Bus Operators Association.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rika from Saboa. We're the voice for the bus and the coach industry. Please come visit me, have a chocky and a good chat.
Thank you, Saboa. Road Transport Management System and Standard Bank. Was it a separate one? Standard Bank.
Thank you, Harry. So the goods that were transported by road, cleared through the agency, will probably finance those trucks by Standard Bank. And then also we're very, very involved with industry standards like RTMS. Dr. Paul will do his thing. But I think the short version is that we're very involved, we're very active, we're very visible, we're very vocal, we're very supportive. And thank you to the Transport Forum and also for SAF for this great sponsorship opportunity. It's fantastic. And thanks for the bit of audible vocal entertainment. It was wonderful. Looking forward to a great, great day. Thank you, Harry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Nordengen, and both Kathy and I are on the steering committee of the RTMS. The fact that the food arrived on time and it's not damaged probably means it was transported by an RTMS certified fleet. The RTMS is a management system standard. It's based on an SABS standard, SANS 3095, and it promotes good practice in any commercial transport, both road freight and passengers, and in fact any commercial fleet can become certified through the RTMS, which means that they get audited. The companies get audited once a year independently to make sure that they dealing with the issues of servicing vehicles on time, medical health of drivers, driver training, driver hours, speeding, overloading, etc., etc. So it's promoting good practice in commercial vehicle transport, which, as we know, is a big challenge in many developing countries if we compare it to overseas countries like in Europe and North America. And the net effect is that we improve efficiency and safety. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. JC Auditors.
Good morning, everyone. The same transporters that brought the food here were certified by JC Auditors. So JC Auditor is a certification body, right, that assists companies in making sure that they get compliant on RTMS, on different standards, your ISOs. We can talk of ISO 9000, 45,000, 14,000. Guys, please come in the table, leave your business card. Let's talk about what JC Auditors can do for you. My name is Gift Ntlabati. I'm a lead auditor in JC Auditors.
Thank you, JC Auditors. Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport.
Morning, Harry. Morning, everyone. My name is Moira from the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, South Africa. So if you want to know more about how you as an individual or an organization can be a part of us, please come through and let's have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Selza. Bit Air Cargo.
Hi, good day, everyone. My name is Mornay from Bit Air Cargo. So we're an air freight solutions company within Southern Africa and into Africa. We operate 737 aircrafts at the current moment and looking to expand our fleet hopefully to a bit of a larger range of the 737. We support the local market heavily, and I'm not going to go down the line to say what we did for everybody. You should know by now. We fly all of the cargo around at night when everybody is sleeping. In the morning when you wake up, you get your Takealot order, your RAM order, your cell phone, your Shein, your Temu. That's us. And we happily do that for you guys. We also offer our services to charter the aircrafts out. So you can charter the full aircraft for special loads. And we're not bound just by certain areas. And please come and visit us. We're happy to share what we can do for you if we have not already done it, and we'll improve on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bit Air Cargo. Platinum sponsor of the Transport Forum, C-Track.
Morning. I'm ready. This is Johan. We from C-Track. I don't want to focus on C-Track and how Crystal helped the food to be here on time. Please visit our stand. Come and ask us who is Crystal, and we can explain.
And with C-Track with Crystal. Right, here we come to SAPIX.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Transport Forum and SAF, for inviting us all here today. I'm Claire Fincham, this is Laseko, and we represent SAPIX. And all the very clever people who have been involved in getting your food to this venue probably were educated through the SAPIX amazing education program. So if you'd like to be involved in that and learn more about that, come and visit us. We're also giving away a free SAPIX membership, which is very worthwhile. And we are the supply chain and operations community. We educate and empower professionals and organizations through our events, our education program, membership, and a phenomenal annual conference. Thanks very much.
Okay, Claire. Now we're with the Transport Forum's Business Directory. Olga, maybe come and stand here. We're close to the speaker there. If we can stand here, please. Come and stand here with me.
Morning, everyone. I'm Olga Mashilo from Buleng-Buntle Consultant. Business Transport Forum Business Directory has been outsourced to Buleng-Buntle Consultant. As a result, if you are interested in listing your company so that you'll be able to access opportunities, you are welcome to come and visit our desk. Today we have a special for anyone who would like to list their businesses on the business directory for 5 years. Please, 5 years. You're paying for 4 years and you're getting 1 year free. Thank you.
That's a deal. Thank you very much, Olga. All right, now we're getting to our host for today, Southern African Association of Freight Forwarders.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tepiso Nkabinde from SAF, and we are the architects of the supply chain since 1921. We have been serving our members and advocating logistics to our members. Thank you.
Yes, and ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, we have a lucky draw here for this beautiful prize. Please come to our desk and drop your name tags. Thank you.
Thank you, so they say they've got a lucky draw here. So, ladies and gents, many of these desks have lucky draws, so it will be worth your while to visit those desks and have your business card in there. All right, let me just put this stuff down. Let's give our sponsors and everybody a big hand again. Righty, ladies and gents, I just want to play the video for our host for today, South African Association of Freight Forwarders. Let me just get this on there.
Does it take to compete on the world stage? To go head to head with the best of the best? Excellence, agility, resilience, the willingness to keep on evolving. Takes courageous leadership to be bold and chart the course, to connect the dots, bringing stakeholders together, to overcome the hurdles we all face, and to deliver best practice. It's about business at the click of a button, delivering at the speed of the internet, connecting people, products, and places, strengthening our supply chains, faster and more cost-effective than ever. Since 1921, we've given voice and vision to the freight forwarding industry. navigating the tides of international trade, evolving ever more sophisticated supply chains, bridging local and global markets to move our economy forward. Welcome to our world. The South African Association of Freight Forwarders, architects of transport for over a century.
Thank you so much, SAF. Ladies and gents, let's give SAF a big hand for hosting this event. Now it's my privilege to hand you over to our MC, Mr. Devlin Naidu, and he's going to do the formal welcome and take us further through the program. Thank you very much, Devlin.
Ladies and gentlemen, damas and hira, manene namaminakazi. Hopefully I got that right. I want you to look at the person next to you and just give him a smile, won't you? Indulge me, please. Right, you can greet them. On behalf of the Southern African Association of Freight Forwarders, as well as Bertling and the Transport Forum, we extend a very warm and loving welcome to each and every one of you seated here today. From our hearts to yours, we say a warm South African welcome. Do we have any international guests joining us from outside of South Africa? If you raise your hands. So we extend a warm welcome to you as well, and to the SAF Secretariat that has traveled from all corners of South Africa, the regions to be with us, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and KZN. Kom ons werk saam om die logistieke netwerk ongesonde te hou. Success is op pad. Masisebenza kunye ekwaka, utengelwano, lungiselelo, ulongokuyo. Impumelelo is endleleni. We do not have challenges, we have opportunities. Let us look at the achievements to improve the logistics network in 2024. So in order to navigate to success, you have to have a critical path. You need to know where you're going to, and then take the steps to get there. We are going to look at the key achievements, look ahead to 2025, and look at the way forward. The National Logistics Crisis Committee, I shudder to think, if it was not established, would have resulted in a very dire situation, a situation that we do not find ourselves in currently. And the NLCC graciously invited business or private sector to participate in its structure, which resulted in the National Logistics Freight Roadmap that we see on the screen. And there's various steps to get to the desired outcome across all the modalities, land, air, and ocean. If we look at navigating towards success, we look at, as explained earlier, the critical path and the key steps that we need to take to achieve success, mobilize resources. We need to monitor and evaluate and ensure that there's a feedback loop so that we can test the impact of the solutions that have been implemented to just gauge how successful that's been, and more especially assign work streams with capable, competent leaders, many of whom are in the room amongst us here today. This face needs no further introduction, a passionate advocate for SA Inc., a captain of industry, and a true hero for South Africa that is extremely modest. If you look back to December 2023, it was a very bleak picture along the coast of Durban, where there were over 178 vessels at outer anchorage waiting to berth. Today, as we speak, I think that number is reduced to just 30. And if we look at Durban, it's the gateway to Africa. The massive backlog, I think it was many captains, or our captain of industry, along many leaders that have heeded the call to stitch the supply chain.
Concerns growing that it will take between 7 and 15 weeks to clear a backlog at the port of Durban, and we'll check in with the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, and Dr. Juanita Marie is the CEO of the association and joins us now. Good evening to you and welcome. I imagine that, you know, a lot of your stakeholders are looking towards the seas with furrowed brows tonight. What impact is it having on your members and on the industry?
Yeah, maybe to give you clarification, I think the situation, we are in a crisis in Durban because that's our biggest port. And to give you indication, it handles about 12,250 containers on a daily basis in and out. And we do have 63 vessels out of Anchorage, but only 22 of them is containerized cargo. And why it's such a crisis? The containerized cargo gives us an indication of the complex economy because that is the manufacturing, the retail, the hospital, pharmaceuticals. So it's not your simple economy, which is in the iron ore and the coal. So that's why we probably impact about 41 different sectors. So the crisis is we need to remove the backlog. And with our indication and working with Transnet, we probably will stabilize, I would think, the middle of February to make sure that we can work the backlog through the system.
And in the meantime, what will the impact be on all of these people that you've just mentioned, those who are waiting for either hospital or medical supplies or whatever else is needed across that retail chain?
Yeah, I think Transnet is and the shipping lines are very helping to see what we can do because, if we can't move the containers, the factories are stopping and we run out of stock. So they do prioritize and see what containers we can call or what vessels we can call into the port. But it's also not a sustainable solution because the moment that you change the vessel rotation and you call vessels in and out, it creates other unintended consequences. So what we can see, people go now for an alternative, and that would be the air modality. But also with the predictions that we have now is that people building up buffer stock of about 2 to 3 weeks, and that have an impact on your SMEs and your smaller operations because they don't necessarily have the cash flow to extend the supply chain with 2 weeks stock into the delivery cycle.
I'd like you to lean in more to that story because when we see these big entities, Transnet is a massive SOE, and we've seen with the corrosion in their rail infrastructure, this dependency on air and sea and land, means to get product in between, in between the ports and their destinations. For people who don't understand what it means to going into a store and accessing food, for example, or products, I should say, on the shelves, just break it down for us in very real terms of how everyone in the country may possibly be affected by what's happening at sea.
Yeah, I think it's my colleague Henk from the Mineral Council that was indicated that we've got a very open economy. So 60% of our imports and exports come by ocean freight and air and different modalities. So when we look at the international supply chain, it all works according to a schedule and you've got a rotation. So when the vessels come in, it's normally at marine sites. So you have your tugboats, helicopter to bring them to Anchorage. And then from there, they move to the berth and then they start offloading the containers and then load the export containers. So in Durban specifically, you work with ship-to-shore cranes and then you've got straddle carriers. So the design capacity for the equipment is to have 108 straddle carriers. And because of a lack of various reasons and a lack of capital investment in the straddle carriers, we have on a good day only about 60, 62 that's working. Wow. Sometimes it goes to about 50, 52. So you can see the design capacity doesn't match up with the demonstrated capacity because our equipment is not top notch and it didn't stay up with the maintenance. So you can think for yourself, the trade is flowing, but if we don't have the right equipment or the correct equipment to handle the volumes that's coming in, we're falling behind. And that's specifically what's happening now. We're falling behind and we can't catch up quickly because our equipment is not in a good situation to catch up to the recovery rate. But it's not all doom and gloom because we have all a responsibility with Transnet. So the shipping lines reach out to Transnet as well. They have a couple of straddle carriers that's secondhand that they can make available to assist. And I think also it's not good for us to hear that National Treasury will not assist Transnet. We all understand why, but we still believe there needs to be a strategic capital investment and we need to hold Transnet accountable that if the money is available, that they will put it in equipment because they handle 9 of all our ports. So if we don't get our port structures sorted out, we captured with our trade in the international space. And I think for us, it's more important that if we don't deliver on time and we don't bring reliability and sustainability in the supply chain, we actually damage SA Inc. because then the world can't trust us that we will import and export as we promised.
Well,
So
we not
that's
only
going
damage
further
the reputation, Juanita, of
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that deserves a huge round of applause, because if you look at stitching the supply chain, I want you to follow the narrative and work with me, won't you? If we looked at the introductions as Harry went around with a camera, we found one common link. It's that SARF stitches the supply chain. So I think if we look now, if I can just get into the public-private partnerships, not just on the sea modality, on the land modality, there were queues kilometers long. Many of you would have experienced the brunt of that. And as a result of infographics that have been put together under the NLCC workstream with input from the private sector, working collaboratively with government, that has completely been eradicated. So much so that the waiting time has been reduced to a couple of minutes. And very modest, I think she put a block in there. The collaboration is the key. If you know if you're able to decipher the clues to the cryptic, you can find out who's behind that block. Any guesses? It's at the bottom. Excellent, Dr. Unita Maria. On that, there's 3 focus areas. It was the energy, transport, and this is obviously acknowledging B4SA and media as a source of this information. You had 3 focus areas that government worked on in 2023. Where were we? Where are we now? It was energy, it was transport and logistics, it was crime and corruption. Very much energy was the enabler. And at the center of it all was logistics, because in order for cargo to move, you are dependent on logistics. And crime and corruption was also to ensure that the logistics network is safe and secure. If we look at that, ladies and gentlemen, we now have 249 billion rand pumped back into our economy. That's R1 billion for every day without load shedding. The lights are on. And if you look around, I think everyone will agree, almal stem saam, dit lyk baie mooi. Jy weet, it's bright, it's lit up, and we're going to light up your lives now with some great news. With the 8 work streams under the NLCC, we have, I think, with us Mr. Ian Bird, also very actively involved in the structures. And of course, alongside, just to name but a few, our chairperson, Dr. Maria Dupria, the unifying factor. Okay, so I want you guys to do this with me. Take out your hands. Please don't hit the person next to you. All right, I want you to connect your thumbs together. This is going to be really, really fun. It's going to really open your eyes, right? You got your thumbs together. The thumbs, and I'm not the scientist here, right? She's in front here, but the thumbs represent inter and intraport competition. I have no idea what that is, but you'll get to know about it in a little bit. So you've got inter and intraport competition, right? Then your index fingers, you're going to join them together. That represents the different modalities, right? Your air, land, ocean, right? You're going to join the modalities together. Then the middle finger, please don't give that to me, but you're going to keep the middle finger down. It's not nice to give anyone the middle finger. Then you're going to join your ring finger. The ring fingers represent public and private sector. And then you're going to join your pinky fingers, or baby fingers, which is basically SARS and the BMA. Right. Now let's work with me. Let's start with the thumbs. What do the thumbs represent? Inter and intraport competition. Are the two, can you separate the two? Yes, right? They're distinct. It's 2 different concepts. Let's start with the next 2 fingers represented the modalities. Can you separate and distinguish between the modalities? Yes. Right, let's come to the last finger, the baby finger, which represented SARS and the BMA, right? Both have an equal role to play. One is border enforcement, obviously one is the regulatory environment. Can you separate? I want you to try separating the public and private sector. Can anyone do it? You simply cannot separate the public and private sector. Pop and Vors, hand in glove, we work together like 2 pieces in a puzzle, and therefore, this has been the key mobilizer. You can go home and try as well, guys. It's never going to separate. Public and private sector, it's not a marriage of convenience, it's a marriage of choice. On that, if we look at the customs and regulatory improvements, where we were and where we are now, there were many legislative amendments, notably Section 38(3)A in terms of the export requirements. Anyone in the wine industry, I'm sure we have a few here in the audience, you now can submit your bill of entry in retrospect, and that was a proposal that SARF put forward to SARS to prescribe by rule that you can submit your declaration outside the prescribed period in the prescribed form, aligned with Rule 3801. Then in terms of your SAP stops, I think it was a real bugbear. You're going to see the stats that will be very revealing. Through scientific risk profiling, as advocated by SARF and the leadership of SARF, we were able to implement a successful solution that now results in the elimination of SAP stops. We've simplified the National Regulator of Compulsory Specifications embargo process. We've driven awareness in that, and it's always easier to proactively manifest compliance than it is to reactively attempt to address non-compliance. Digitalization of the DELRAD single window, and in 2025, BMA Health will also be the first or the next agency to be digitized. I know that's music to a lot of your ears. Dit klink is mooi as the songs that were sung by Jardine and Marie. Perfect. I think it's definitely music to our ears. Digitalization and the PNR index, the integrity has been improved. You will now have real-time access to data where incorrect detentions will soon become a thing of the past, and many detentions that have been corrected to the SAF online platform. E-commerce phase 4 toward a simplified declaration. There's agility in the process, and we also look at, as mentioned, the BMA Health being taken on board. I'm going to give you back a bit of time as well. So we all have, the one thing that unifies all of us, the unifying factor is that we are all citizens of South Africa, irrespective of our color, irrespective of our race, irrespective of our gender, irrespective of our beliefs. There's one unifying belief, and that is we have a country to serve, we have to enable the economy, and logistics, supply chain is a key enabler and a key driver of the South African economy. So in terms of shared responsibility, let's give more. Let's give more to our organizations. Yes, this is a live broadcast, 9 to 5, coming to you live from the Senate room in the Empress Palace. 9 to 5, you should get the frequency, you'll know that's the sound of our lives. But on the point of 9 to 5, remember, if you give more to your organization, you will give more to South Africa, and you can make a difference. If it is to be, it is up to each of us. Shared infrastructure, data is key. It's a shared responsibility between public and private sector. We want to have a private sector participation model that works in a shared network, and that is obviously collaboration. I'm reminded, if we reflect back to the year 1994, and don't believe everything you read in the media, people said that the government of national unity would not last a day. I think we're well on our way to 200 days. More than that, they said that it would collapse, it's not going to work, but we have seen the success in the logistics network of government working with business. And it always seems impossible until it is done. And this is a man, our late president, and a key role model that has made it possible for all of us from diverse backgrounds to have unity and diversity and sit together in a room, brainstorm ideas, and, as UNITA often says, move the needle for SA Inc. On that note, we have a burning desire to build an intact logistics network supported by a capable government working with the private sector and labor. Miracle in its design, and you're going to experience some of the miracle in action later. Remove the shackles in the supply chain movement. It is very much a liberation from inefficiency, a liberation from inadequacy, and a liberation from all of the delays. The supply chain is predicated on cost, time, and service delivery. So we can have a bit of fun later on that point as well. And it reminds me of a song by Shania Twain. I'm not going to sing it, but maybe Maria and Jardine can give us a rendition later. In the song, she says, "Looks like we made it. Look how far we've come, my baby. We might have taken the long way, but we knew we'd get there someday. They said, I bet they'll never make it, but just look at us holding on. We knew we'd get there someday, still growing strong." On that note, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Southern African Association of Freight Forwarders, led by our passionate captain of industry and CEO, Dr. UNITA Maria, Mr. Patrick Golden from Bertling, as well as Mr. Harry van Heestien, the custodian of the Transport Forum, serving selflessly, all three of these individuals. Let's give them a huge, reverberating round of applause that resonates all the way from Kuruman to Gqeberha. As the sun rises over the R21 and will in a few hours set on the N1, the Emperor's Palace Senate Room remains the destination of choice for many a logistic professional as we converge to collaborate, corroborate, and inspire change, one seam at a time. And I want to try this again. Kom ons werk saam om die logistieke netwerk ongeskonde te hou. Success is op pad. Baie dankie. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to resume my MC voice. I'm going to introduce the next panel discussion. I know it's scheduled to start at 9:40. So let me share a quick joke with you, right? Actually, it's not a joke, it's a true story. So we received a directive from our boss that we need to be at 6 a.m. So I said, okay, hang on, Harry, I'm going to stay over. So I stayed over. So my wife and I, we stayed over here. And I said, you know what? Let me just try my luck. It is December. Let's go down to the casino. I put 100 Rand in the machine and I pressed the button. And guess what happens? I lost, yeah. So 100 Rand goes down. It's 10 Rand, max bet. Obviously, the bigger you play, the bigger you win. I'm not encouraging gambling, by the way. We don't take unnecessary risks. But anyway, came down to the last 10 Rand. I lost all of my money. And I said, please, we need some revenue here. Let's press the button again. Maybe we can help keep the logistics network intact as well at the same time. Press the button, and guess what happens? I won 2,000 Rand. So then I take the cash and I put it into my shirt pocket, and I ran up to the hotel room and I said, love, I've just won 2,000 Rand. And she wasn't interested. She says, it's fine, we'll talk about it in the morning. So went to bed, my shirt on, get up the next morning, and I feel my shirt pocket. The money is gone. And then she looks at me and she says, love, what's the matter? And I touch my shirt pocket again. I said, love, I'm not sure what it is, but I'm not feeling 2 grand. My jokes are dry, like Savannah, but you can still drink it. Someone did say that I have a good memory. I know this is an old one, but I'll be like the DSTV PVR. I'll play it back for you. Someone did say I have a good memory, I have a bad memory, or have a very great memory. I've forgotten who that was. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our first panel discussion for the afternoon. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panelists as well as the moderator for the session. Our first panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is believed to be, and you can check out their bios on LinkedIn, right? They've got decades of experience, wealth of experience, etc. But I'm going to put a celebratory spin onto it. Our first panelist happens to be a distant cousin of Will Smith, a really dapper gentleman who goes by the name of Mr. Lunga Molloy, the Director of Economic Policy at Business Unity South Africa. A huge round of applause for Mr. Molloy. You'll see why I refer to him as a distant cousin of Will Smith. He's got that swagger in his step. Mr. Molloy, can I ask, there's many single ladies here. Yeah, are you available, sir? He's engaged. You can't get through. All right, on that point, we go to the next panelist. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist, I think he's joining us online. I stand under correction, but he reminds me that there's no relation to James Cameron. He's also a director. It's just at the tip of the iceberg. Our next speaker, for those of you that have deciphered the clues to the cryptic, and I think you've seen it earlier, is Mr. Martin Cameron, Managing Director of Trade Research Advisory.
Morning, everybody.
Perfect. Our next speaker, I believe also joining us online, is here. Is John here? Oh, okay. Okay, our next speaker, unfortunately, is not able to join us, so he's not well. He does send his apologies. The Chief Director of Africa Bilateral Economic Relations, but please indulge me because I prepared the script. He has more connections and contacts than my Indian uncle in Chatsworth, Durban, because whenever you have a problem and I need to contact ITAC, you just call John and he's able to help you. So John, we appreciate the insights you've shared. And ladies and gentlemen, our moderator for this afternoon session, I'm getting ahead of myself here, is Ms. Olga Twala. She is a legal eagle and SARS international trade lawyer. Olga, I hope you're not charging us by the hour. Lawyers are expensive. You may join the stage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am a little bit soft-spoken, and I wish I had half the personality that Devlin has. Please. Welcome to our first panel discussion. As already introduced, my name is Olga Twala. I am the international trade lawyer for SAF. And for this panel discussion, we are going to be talking about non-tariff barriers and a bit of alignment with the AFCFTA. According to an article published by Tralac, the elimination of non-tariff barriers may actually have a greater impact than the reduction of tariffs, actual tariffs. And today's discussion is going to be centered around them. We have long, throughout the year, been in engagements of this nature, deliberating on issues of this nature as well. And part of the discoveries that we've made is that part of the issues that have plagued our borders are predominantly attributed to congestions, which can also be attributed to issues of capacity and government agencies' inability to handle the volumes of trade. So today, just to introduce the topic, I would like for Martin, who's online, to try and give us a bit of an understanding of what non-tariff barriers may be. just give us a sense of what they may be and tell us how they impact trade for business, Martin.
Thank you, Olga, and morning to the audience. I hope you can hear me well. Olga, can you just give me an indication? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so non-tariff barriers, for those that are not familiar with the topic, is a fancy word for practical real life constraints, as we all know. I think within the African context, if we specifically talk about today's focus topic around the AfCFTA, one of the major challenges that we have in terms of the non-tariff barriers is obviously infrastructure deficiencies. And when we talk about infrastructure deficiencies, in broad terms, we mean things like poor physical infrastructure. I always say access does not mean accessible. So on paper and on maps, and when you talk to government officials, sometimes they'll say, yes, you have access. There is a bridge, but the bridge cannot handle a certain load of a truck. So the physical condition of infrastructure is also important, not only the existence. And that goes for ports and railways, etc. So I think in Africa, one of our largest challenges from a non-tariff barrier perspective is infrastructure deficiencies, whether it's the absence of actual infrastructure or whether it is the condition, the accessibility of the infrastructure that is still to a large degree hampering growth in Africa. And specifically, if we think of the landlocked countries, which are very dependent on the maritime connected economies around Africa, depending on how you divvy up the world, Africa's got 16 landlocked countries inside of the continent, and these countries' lifelines are dependent on their neighbors' infrastructure. So if the infrastructure is not there, then they will suffer. Then we also have administrative and regulatory barriers. So things like inconsistent customs procedures, and you guys are very au fait with that topic. I'm not going to go into detail on that. We also have things like more for the actual exporters rather than necessarily for the movers of goods, technical barriers to trade, things like technical regulations and conformity assessment procedures regarding the actual nature of products, which can be challenging as well. Then a well-known one, especially in the media for South African fruits and vegetables, and to some degree meats as well, is your sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Typically, countries have different standards in terms of health and safety regulations, and depending on the actual exporters' sophistication and whether they actually are in a position to certify certain products, that can be a barrier for them. However, we must be careful with this non-tariff barrier concept. Sometimes what one exporter might perceive as a barrier is actually a competitor's edge. If you do comply, if you can make the grade, if you do tick the boxes, then it actually becomes a competitive edge. So one must be very careful when you evaluate so-called non-tariff barriers, not always to say that it only has a negative effect. For those that comply to it, it can have a very positive effect. Then another non-tariff barrier is information, and simply lack of trade information, opportunity information, regulatory and other requirements, etc., is also a non-tariff barrier. More on the payment financial side, we're talking about foreign exchange restrictions, which in some economies can be, and we see that a lot in Africa, especially the commodity-linked economies, that can be a bottleneck and a barrier. And then informal trade barriers as well, unofficial roadblocks. I'm sure your members are very familiar with that, and informal fees that need to be raised all the way along the transport chain. So it causes unpredictability, it causes significant costs, and therefore the so-called informal trade barriers can also be quite a limiting factor. Then there are some non-tariff barriers which one can actually look back at our own production environment that can impact on our ability to trade, and that also is kind of qualified as a non-tariff barrier. We've been fortunate so far with the load shedding having been under control for the last couple of months, but it can easily become a challenge again. So non-tariff barriers, one can even take as broad as, for instance, availability of energy and electricity. And then more on the regulatory side, intellectual property rights and the fact that in some markets they don't comply with and adhere to international property regulation. So that can also be a non-tariff barrier. And then lastly, a very obvious one that people don't necessarily always think of as a non-tariff barrier, but language and cultural barriers can also be included under non-tariff barriers. Now, typically, one of the major, shall we say, differentiating factors is when we talk about trade and trade analysis, one of the challenges that we find is that non-tariff barriers are very difficult to quantify, and that makes it to a large degree very difficult also to plan for these non-tariff barriers. If you don't know how long it's going to take a government to repair a bridge or to build a bridge, new infrastructure or delays, how do you factor that into your planning and how do you quantify the effect of that? So in typical in trade research environment, we kind of broadly say that non-tariff barriers are those things that we have a difficulty in quantifying for business decision-making purposes and the effect thereof. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you so much, Martin. To bring it back into the room, Lunga, from a business perspective, what would you term as the most prevalent NTBs that have plagued industry throughout the year? And what have been the challenges in terms of addressing them and maybe trying to even advocate for their elimination?
Okay. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Olga, I'm going to need you to speak up just a little bit because I'm struggling even on stage to hear you. So, I mean, Mr. Cameron makes a good point in terms of just listing the raft of NTBs and the difficulty in terms of not necessarily identifying them, but putting in place mitigating strategies to eradicate or eliminate them. And I think from a business perspective, while it stands true that the number of kind of what you would consider the micro NTBs, which includes the kind of convoluted customs processes, the poor trade infrastructure, and a number of other issues in terms of regulation, payments, and I think Mr. Cameron also touched on the issue of capacity and communication as well. All of those are issues that face businesses on a regular basis. But on a sliding scale or on a ranking scale, if you were to approach any business and ask them, what is your number one issue when it comes to or related to NTBs, they will tell you that it's a poor trade infrastructure. And that is directly linked to some of the structural challenges that we are currently seeing in our transport and logistics network. And so part of our work as an organization and at BUSA has been really to look at some of the macro issues that are cross-cutting for businesses, that have a detrimental effect on our ability to trade, on our ability to foster intra-Africa trade. I'll give you a practical example. In the year 2021 to 2022, the mining sector lost out about 150 to 200 billion rands that they couldn't take up in terms of opportunities due to the commodity boom. And that in itself was not due to the fact that they couldn't meet the demands or the global demands for the commodities, but it was purely down to the fact that they couldn't move their products from point A to point B. So from points of production to points of exit. And that kind of dysfunctionality is probably one of the things that has had the most detrimental effect on businesses and their ability to trade in a very long while. And so part of our work has really been focused at a macro level in terms of saying, how do you begin to sort out those deficiencies and those challenges? Because the knock-on effect, or rather the added benefit of that, is that once you kind of at a macro level tackle some of these challenges, you then begin to realize some positive outcomes in terms of reducing port congestion, for instance. And I saw in an earlier presentation by my colleague here, he spoke about vessels that are at the Durban port ready to berth, and we've seen a reduction in that. And so it's important to take a holistic approach in terms of approaching or rather eradicating NTBs, Because what we do realize as a business organization is that some of the more macro issues have a much more detrimental effect. And if you had to go to any business here and if you had to ask them what is their number one problem in terms of movement of their goods into the African market, they would tell you the poor trade infrastructure, which has a detrimental effect on the overall trade architecture, which also includes, by the way, some of the deficiencies I think that my colleague mentioned that sit at the level of institutions, specifically in terms of government institutions. We know the current capacity constraints, for instance, at the BMA, that has really in the past while had a very detrimental effect on our ability to trade. And so some of those inefficiencies, if you have to go to any trusted trader, they would tell you that those are some of the issues that they would like to see resolved from an NTB perspective.
Just to piggyback off of that, I'm of the understanding that government has governance mechanisms in place, and that would mean before they even formulate processes, there are frameworks that inform it. And in addition to that, there is monitoring and evaluation. And I'd like to believe that as a result of that, we end up with reports which are intended to influence and also impact on decision making going forward. And I'd love to understand from my panel, do you think that government uses the information that is deducted from the reportings that they are given to make informed decisions? And I say this because if there are capacity challenges, definitely they would have been picked up on, because in as much as we have staff working on an annual basis or quarterly basis, their performance is reviewed. And those processes, as they are put into place, they come in with certain norms and standards, which are supposed to inform the type of capacity or the level of capacity that is required. So from that point of view, does the panel think that maybe government in itself does not use the information that they have to better inform decisions? Because some of these issues aren't only dependent on business to try and lobby and advocate for them, but they are a direct responsibility on government agencies to address issues internally. Maybe you can go first, Lunga.
Okay, I can take a stab at that. So I think we need to make a differentiation between government agencies and departments. And I think there are varying degrees of success where we've seen data-driven policy making on the part of certain government agencies. And on the part of other government agencies, we just haven't seen the kind of progressive policy making that takes into consideration what you mentioned in terms of the various reports that come, some of them come from the private sector and are able to identify what the pain points are, what some of the bottlenecks are. And I think SARS is a good example of an organization that is trying to work very closely with industry and the private sector to ensure that the solutions that they bring about are tailor-made, but they're also informed by the end user. And so SARS is a glaring example of a good organization that I think is making use of the data that is available to them, but is also adapting to a much more changing environment in terms of the demands of the private sector. I think while on the opposite spectrum, obviously, you'll find institutions such as the BMA, which is really struggling to keep up with the demands of industry. And so I think it needs to be said, some of the decisions that they have made, for instance, in terms of their processes, are not informed by any kind of empirical data. And so that makes it much more difficult. And this is one of the issues that we recently raised with the Minister of Home Affairs to say, we think there's a disjuncture in terms of BMA's understanding of what their role is and how industry is experiencing BMA. And so one of the common responses or rebuttals to that kind of a notion is to say there is insufficient capacity at the level of the organization, which is a PMA, or the level of the agency. And so therefore we cannot be as agile, we cannot be as adaptive. And so therefore some of the things that we do as an agency do have a detrimental impact on industry, but also from a regulations point of view, we believe that we need to stick to the objectives of what the agency has been created for. So to answer your question in short, I think there's varying degrees of the application of certain data sets that are available to government. We've seen critical successes in certain agencies, but we've also seen glaring deficiencies in some of the other government agencies.
Thank you. Martin, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Lunga, as well. I think the challenge that we have as business, and at the same time, some of the colleagues that operate in government, is that information is key to fact-based decision making. And while one would like to have better and the comprehensive information that is required to make proper decisions, it's not always available. Now, there we, as private sector, we also have a responsibility to make available of our information. Sometimes I find that private sector is very skeptical of government when they ask for information and is not necessarily willing to share the type of information that is asked. So I think the general gist of my kind of message would be careful to criticize, because whenever you point a finger, three fingers are pointing back. And if everybody applies that thinking, whether it's from a government perspective, whether it's from private sector perspective, we will be more considerate as to what is it that we really need to make infrastructure work. And yes, as Lunga said, there are examples of specific instances where we can pinpoint and say this and people didn't do what they were supposed to be doing. Maybe they have the capacity or experience or other constraints. But in my experience, it's very difficult to plan long-term infrastructure, and you should err on the upside in the sense of rather putting a bridge too big or a port too large than too small. But immediately you sit with a challenge that there's always budget constraints. That's the real world. It's pull and push factors that impacts on these things. And I've seen, for instance, way back in the early 90s, the expansion of Richards Bay Minerals and the port capacity that was required to help our exporters to achieve volumes in those years took a lot of motivation and fighting with the various sources to actually get the funding to improve the capacity available at the port. And that immediately delays things. So I think generally, I think we can all agree that there are challenges from the government perspective, but at the same time, don't absolve private sector 100% from that equation, because it takes two to tango, as they say. And key to that challenge is information and knowledge sharing, and making government more effective by working with them in a positive light and a positive attitude. I think none of the government officials that are trying to do their jobs will, in my opinion, it's the exception that will not try and do a proper job, and that will be negative towards private sector's needs. I think they all realize that they are part of private sector when they go home, and they need the goods that are imported for their kids and their wives and their family. So don't paint everybody with the same brush, but at the same time, we should not accept mediocrity, and we should not accept non-performance. We should speak up and point those out. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. And in the spirit of understanding, just out of curiosity, to both panel members, we have spoken a lot about interagency coordination, and we've seen it as some kind of a solution to much of the fragmentations that we see in the borders. And I'd like to just pose a question to the panel to say, sometimes as business, when we advocate for ourselves, do we bear in mind the fact that it's legislation that govern the existence of these agencies? And in order for them to also be a coordinated front front, so to speak, there are legislative implications that we need to factor into that discussion. You know, I'd like to understand from the panel how much of that is factored in much of the conversations that business has in trying to seek solutions and trying to advocate for things like your single window systems.
So I mean, to answer your question, I think there's due consideration that government works differently from the private sector. And I think there's also a recognition that there are processes within government that need to be followed from a legislative point of view. And the integration of government agencies working towards a common goal is something that government itself has put forward as part of their plans. So what we would expect is for them to create a conducive environment from a legislative and a regulatory point of view to ensure that seamless integration between agencies. And I think one of the things that you actually mentioned is the issue of the single window. And I think one of the things that's bedeviling that entire process is just the inability of government agencies themselves to coordinate and integrate towards one singular objective. And of course, that in itself is a complex issue. We have a myriad of agencies, some of which don't even belong to the same departments. And so the issue of how do you begin to integrate and create a seamless process between those agencies is itself proving to be very difficult. And so I think we do actually understand the complexity around that issue. And I think secondly, it's really just from a government perspective, capacity constraints, if you look at, for instance, financial resources. As building and maintaining such systems does require substantial investment. And what it does obviously mean is that there are requirements that are put upon the fiscus to ensure that the systems are up and running and that they do actually benefit the traders in the manner in which they are supposed to. But the complexities that stem from the intergovernmental relations themselves, from a legislative and a regulations point of view, is a challenge. The inability to free up possible resources from a financial standpoint is also an ongoing concern. And so therefore, I think part of the reason why we haven't seen the kind of traction that we would want to see in issues related, for instance, in the example where you made around the single window, can be attributed back to some of the challenges that the state is facing, and not necessarily, for me, at least in my opinion, cannot be tied back to a legislative or regulation point of view.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Lunga. I think Lunga articulated it well. I think the only thing that I would say is one must also just keep in mind that in a lot of cases, different entities are created for different purposes. And sometimes you have and you need tension between these departments or units or bodies for a reason. As an example, so one must be careful saying we need to coordinate and integrate 100%, but at the same time, we still need to keep in mind that we have particular mandates and objectives. And if I think, for instance, of a practical example, if your health and safety inspections, when it comes to foodstuffs, is overridden for the sake of experience, you will potentially put your citizens and their health at risk. So in the process of alignment and coordination, there's definitely a lot of room to improve, but at the same time, we should be careful. There's a reason why we have government organizations, units, departments, etc. And remember, government is put in place by people for the people. So if they operate as planned and as mandated, ultimately it should be to the better of everybody. But that does not mean that it only focuses on one stakeholder group's requirements, such as specifically in logistics and transport. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you so much, Martin. In the interest of time, I'll just ask one last question before I move to the audience and I open up for questioning. I'd like to know from the panel, what sort of readiness do you think we need to have in relation to or in preparation of the coming into effect of the AFCFTA? I'd like to understand what kind of readiness should we be looking into in relation to non-tariff barriers in preparation of the grander launching or coming into effect of the AFCFTA?
So I mean, the AFCFTA is in full effect. Colleagues would know that early last year, Minister Patel from the DTIC officially sent out the first shipment under the guided trade initiative that is part of the AFCFTA. I think the issue is not necessarily whether at the level of implementation, the state of readiness of the private sector. I think what's becoming glaring with us for us in the conversations that we're having with the DTIC and a number of other partners, including the AFCFTA Secretariat, is the lack of information dissemination to the private sector to enable us to take up opportunities that do exist. And that stems from a number of issues. And one of the issues that we have raised with the DTIC, for instance, is that as opposed to many other African countries, what we have not successfully done is build institutional capacity within the DTIC that looks specifically at implementation and monitors implementation. And also, of course, runs an advocacy programs that enables the private sector to understand exactly what opportunities are available. We've been trading under the guided trade initiative for a period of about a year, and the uptake to that is still less than 20%. And so there's a missing link between the information that is readily available to traders and the ability for the government, or the implementing partner, which would be the government in this space, to communicate effectively what those opportunities are, what are the challenges that are currently in place, how are they working towards eradicating some of those challenges, and how can we encourage much more greater uptake of opportunities of the AFCFTA. And so moving beyond the conversation on non-tariff barriers, I think part of the work that needs to be done, at least in the forthcoming or the medium term, is really to begin to take on board in a collaborative manner partnerships with the private sector such that we can begin to roll out an advocacy program that clearly spells out what the opportunities are, but also put in place practical tools for private sectors players to enable them to take up those opportunities. And I think one of the core tenets of the AFCFTA is around, for instance, the growth of the SMEs and how certain protocols of the AFCFTA, including the digital trade protocol, will enable the growth of SMEs, but also enable them to then capture new markets that weren't readily available to them. And the issue then becomes, how do you begin to do that? What are the practical steps? And one of the things that we are calling for as business is a collaboration between ourselves and the government to put together an institutional arrangement that brings parties from both stakeholders to for us to explore what the opportunities are, but also to speak candidly about what some of the challenges are. Because as I said, we are part of the GTI, but yet we don't see the kind of traction that is needed within that space. And so for me, it's really a call for a partnership between ourselves and government, because I think as much as they are a driving agent, it's important for the private sector to draw closer to government as well.
Martin.
Thank you, Olga and Lunga, for that. I think, you know, the three fingers pointing back at private sector is a very apt example in this case. Government can only do so much when it comes to agreements such as the AFCFTA, and most of what they do is stuff on paper, and most of what they do actually does not make a difference to business from a South African perspective in the short to medium term. And why do I say that? Because where the difference lies is where South African exporters and entrepreneurs are, shall we call it, more squeamish to go and less interested in. And that's in Western North Africa and to some degree up in East Africa. We have our traditional market in the Sub-Sahara SADC focused part of Africa. And in that context, the AFCFTA is not suddenly going to make a huge difference to companies and opportunities and trading into that part of the world, because we already have access to those markets, and it's just a question of business as usual and doing better on, you know, the standard stuff like non-tariff barriers, etc. But under the AFCFTA, the real potential for South African companies are to start looking into the non-traditional, unusual markets that we're not used to trading with. That is where the AFCFTA will really make a difference for us. And government cannot take you and make you drink that water. You've got to do it for yourself. So our companies have to really investigate those opportunities and see what are the upcoming markets that will open up for their products under the AFCFTA, because we are also to some degree saturated the close by markets already. If you look at our trade profiles with most of the SADC countries, South Africa is a major supplier of most of the goods that they import in any case. So there's limited scope for us, you know, in that regard to expand, and one should not expect fireworks from the AFCFTA in the short to medium term in the SADC context and sub-Sahara context. So that would be kind of my 2 cents worth on this topic. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you so much, Martin. I'd like to open up to the audience for some questioning. Can somebody maybe with the roving mic just assist?
So, ladies and gents, you can put up your hand and I'll approach you with the camera and a microphone and you can ask a question. There we go.
Thanks, Harry. I'm Charles Day. My question is this: in looking to break down NTBs, to what extent does the panel see a lack of skills on both the private and the state sector? Do you find that it is difficult to implement policies on government side because there's a lack of skills on that side? And do you find that within business, there's a lack of skills needed in order to operate efficiently in overcoming NTBs? Thank you.
So thank you for that question. And I think you've kind of answered the question while asking it. And a big part of that is, yes, sure, there are skills deficiencies within government that lead to our inability to eliminate certain NTBs. If you look at the customs process, for instance, and just how convoluted that is in essence a skills issue to a certain extent. And so to build the necessary capacity in those institutions is very important to eradicate some of those NTBs. I think on the part of the private sector, what we are commonly accused of is being complainers, right? Any single challenge that we face in terms of, or that has an impact in terms of our ability to trade, we chalk it off as an NTB. Whereas I think what my colleague was saying earlier on, what you would find, for instance, if you look at intra-Africa trade, what's an NTB for us is a regulatory requirement or a standardization requirement for another operator in another country. And so the removal of that would mean that it has an adverse effect on that business in another country. But I think the goal through the various agreements such as AFCFTA is to really to begin to harmonize the regulations such that there is almost a fit for all type of an approach in terms of the regulations themselves. But I think part of the issue is also around information dissemination, right? So businesses in South Africa would not necessarily know what the scope of all regulations and requirements are to take goods into a Kenya, to take goods into a Zambia. And so therefore that in itself is also a challenge. And so the skills deficit that you speak of, I think does sit on both sides of the fence. And although we'll be more defensive in saying the challenges that we face are faced by a number of traders. And so therefore we identify them as NTBs. But the ability for member countries, for instance, the signatories of the AfCFTA, to eliminate those NTPs is also something that needs to be investigated. I think there's explicit requirements within the agreement itself of all member states that once those NTPs are identified and are logged with that member country, there does need to be, at an organizational point of view, an effort on the part of that government to eradicate that NTP. Now, the issue then becomes, as I said before, seems to be an NTP for us is an objective and a requirement to trade in that specific country. And so the issue is then, how do you begin to harmonize the regulations? How do you begin to harmonize the landscape such that we kind of find each other and not necessarily on our part show bias or favoritism towards our trading conditions? Thank you.
Martin?
Well, maybe just to add to the discussion on this particular question, Charles, I think we must also understand that something like the AfCFTA and like the aspirational potential of what wants to be achieved must be put within context of time. So yes, we have a shortage of skills, and yes, we have a shortage of experience. But it's easy to forget that the EU, which is probably the closest as a concept of the AfCFTA, although it does have fundamental differences in the way that it looks and operates than what is envisaged for the AfCFTA. But the EU took 45 years to get to the point where we started recognizing what we as today think of when we refer to the EU. So we've only been seriously going at the AfCFTA for 3 or 4 years. So you will have, when we talk about specific skills and experience and expertise in the context of the AfCFTA, there's still a lot of learning to be had. And as we go along, people will, get better at it and will start understanding more what the challenges are and how those need to be addressed. That doesn't remove the skills shortage and challenges for, call it, day-to-day activities that government departments and different role players should be doing as part of their design, irrespective of whether the AfCFTA existed or not. But I just caution people to always, if you want to look at a reference case, the EU is probably the closest, and they've got huge, deep experience around managing something like the EU. But make no mistake, it took 45 plus years to get to the point where they actually started integrating and operating successfully and efficiently. Remember, before that, it was still a bit of chaos, and countries were doing things in competition with each other. And even today, nationalist, shall we say, interests within the EU still prevails and still influences what happens in trade, even within the member states. So you're never going to get rid of that. So as Lunga indicated, if your companies are threatened from whatever requirement, regulatory or otherwise, you will, as a country within a unit like that or a organization like that, you will always want to look after your own first. And it's very difficult to get to the point where everybody starts seeing the benefit to the greater good. And I think that will probably take even longer in Africa's context, because make no mistake, remember the EU only started initially was only 15 countries, and those countries were in relative terms a lot more homogeneous than what we are thinking and seeing and living in Africa. People forget Africa is a big place. We've got lots of communities, lots of countries, but even within countries, and there's all kinds of vested interests that need to be overcome. So I think you must just kind of be realistic as to the skills and experience that will be required to make something like the AfCFTA work. Will take time. It's not something that you can fast track, and there's no quick recipe that you can drop in some water overnight and create the people that need to run these things in an efficient way. They simply don't exist yet.
Thank you so much, Martin, for that touch of sobriety. Any more questions on the floor?
Thank you, Olga, and thank you for the topic and the panelists. I have two questions. Maybe the one I'll face or direct to Martin. We look at the AFCTFA, and you're quite right, we're 3 to 4 years in the making. But we actually want the AFCTFA to work for us as a country, because then we can enhance growth, and hopefully we can go to a space that we have industrialization and we can make it for the bigger market. So I just want your feeling on that, because if we can wait another 20, 25 years, that's not going to help us with the intra-trade into Africa. Then my question to Lunga would be, is that if you become the president of the country, what would be your practical steps to bring private sector and public sector closer together? Because many of the NTPs is definitely because we don't work in a cohesive approach. And you are currently in BUSA, but let's say we make you the president. What would be your practical steps? Thank you.
Well, Lunga, fortunately, I've got the easy question to answer. Juanita, thanks for that. I think short and sweet is yes, obviously we don't want to wait 25 or 30 years for the benefits of the AFCFTA. And I think that's my message, is that incomplete, imperfect as it is, there are opportunities, but it takes a lot more work from our companies to identify and to utilize and to mine those opportunities. Africa do hold a lot of potential in certain fields, in certain product groups, etc. And in the end, by building the right relationships and networks, we can utilize and we can tap into that potential in the short to medium term. But I think if we're going to wait for things to be perfect, as one of the very famous philosophers said, perfect is the enemy of good enough. And in the meantime, we've got to work with good enough, and we know how to operate in Africa. So we should not wait for the AFCFTA and all the promises that the politicians make around the AFCFTA. I think that's the core of my message. That's going to take 30, 40, 50 years to materialize. The kind of things that they're talking about, the end state that they envisage is way, way down the line. In the interim, there's a lot of opportunity that we can go and mine, but it will mean that you have to continue being innovative and have tenacity and work within the African context, because these things are not going to be perfect overnight. I hope that kind of gives some hope, Juanita. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, so Juanita, thank you for having so much faith in me. And putting me on the spot, really. Practical steps to private-public partnerships. I think if you look at the back end of the 6th administration and the beginning of the 7th administration, it has become glaringly obvious that some of the big challenges that the country is facing from an economy point of view do require a collaborative effort in terms of tackling those issues. And I think one of the things that we have done really well as business is to establish a platform through what we call Business for South Africa, to really take some of the focal points, and I think my colleague spoke earlier in his introduction around the kind of interventions that we've seen, such as the NLCC and the likes, and that really was advocated for by the private sector. And so the teachings of that is that where there are government deficiencies and where private sector expertise and skills do exist, it's important to be able to create institutions where you can draw those in to ensure efficiencies in terms of public sector service delivery. And so for me, one of the things that I would do is to replicate that exact model. And what I would do is elevate it to the status of an advisory council, for instance, where you have permanent sitting members from both the private sector and the public sector who will constantly sit on that advisory council and advise on some of the critical big ticket issues. And so I think part of what we need to do going forward, and I think we are encouraged specifically by the GNU, is that there's a greater emphasis on the private sector coming to the fore in terms of plugging the gaps where public sector deficiencies do exist. And so for me, really, it would be to build that kind of institutional capacity, but also to foster a relationship that doesn't pit the private sector against the public sector. And so it's not necessarily an issue of a competition between the two sectors, but how do we begin to complement each other in terms of ensuring that we come up with solutions that are a better fit for the economy as a whole. Thank you. And I see immediately a hand at the back.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. This is Mamone Ndaba from ZNP Solutions. These interactions, I think, are quite inspiring. Mine is not a question, rather a proposal and a request. Also in emphasizing the question that Juanita asked, what would be the practical questions to get us moving? I would really like to propose that we, from this platform, we have a platform that will receive and accept proposals that will contribute to us forming collaborative partnerships, because we entrepreneurs sitting here, as we listen to Martin and the panel, we're already thinking solutions. But how do we facilitate those solutions and get to discuss with the relevant people so that we can be impactful and progressive? So mine is more of a request that from here, if we could have a contact person that we can speak to, that we can put forward our contributions and our proposals, that we become active and participate in these proposals going forward.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I think that comment marks the end of our discussion. In the interest of time, is it okay? It's not okay. Okay, we'll take.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you for the indulgence. My name is Eric Motswane from Sabua, Gauteng. I'm just checking here that there's lots of reference to government, private sector, and I've not heard whether there's some government official here. But can we come down a little bit? Let's come down from BRICS, G20, EU, AU, SADC. Let's come down to the townships where things are happening. One of the speakers said that if it went as planned, as mandated, the wheels would not come off, right? So I'm trying to, at a level of the townships, is it a lack of coordination or lack of integration that causes the current chaos in relation to a spate of loss of lives that is so unnecessary as a result of suppliers, parcel shops, and so on? Where are the wheels coming off? I know we are discussing at the high level, but can you come down a bit so that when I leave here and I go home and my kids ask me, what did you benefit? What does it mean to the current situation? Where did the wheels come off in the supply? Whether there's collapse of oversight by government or collapse by private sector. Thank you.
Okay, Devlin will take over from here. Martin, I'm not too sure if you're still available. I saw Lunga nodding, and I'm not too sure if he feels he's the right desk to attend to this.
I think the gentleman asked a very relevant question. In the end, all of these things impact on people at home, your daughter, your son, your mother, your father, your grandmother. But we must also understand that there are different pieces in the whole chain of the economy, and the focus of the session is more at, as you rightly indicated, at the higher level when we talk about the movement of goods between countries. Having said that, I can give an attempt to see if I can help you to understand. And I think part of the challenge is that obviously we do have a constraint within South Africa from an economic growth perspective. And why is that important? Well, if we don't have economic growth and economic activity, people don't have jobs. And if people don't have jobs, they become desperate, but they also, in a lot of the cases, become what would be the word? They view any outsider as competition. If you think of, you know, in the hundreds and thousands of years before civilization, you had to walk around, you had to look for food. If there was somebody else, you may either choose to work with them cooperatively and make more food, or you could compete with them and take away the food. And that's the reality on the ground that we see when there's hardship, when there's not enough work for everybody, and economic pressures come along. Then you see the kind of effects that we've seen in recent years, and more recently in the spaza shop specific, you know, examples that you mentioned. Now, does that imply a breakdown, if you like, as you kind of the words that you use there, in either private sector or government? Well, to some degree, you can lay the blame in front of all the parties involved, you know, whether it is the local community, whether it is, for argument's sake, some foreigners that own a spaza shop and bring in goods into a community, whether it's private sector in more general terms, or for instance, the policing services, the enforcers of rules and regulations and standards. If we just think of all the poor children that has passed away as a result of contaminated foods recently, yes, there's many, you know, fingers that point to many different players. I think the message that you need to take home, as per your request, is to say we have to be more tolerant and we have to understand better why is it that people are acting in the way that they do. And at the same time, we must also then also think of how do our civil society manage and assist government to make sure that we enforce the regulations, the standards, the requirements. So as an example, don't go and buy food that does not have an expiry date on it. But at the same time, people will tell you, but we're hungry, we don't have money, it's cheaper. So by educating people about the dangers of rather go and buy fresh alternative foods than, for instance, in the examples that were quoted in the media, food that's been expired and didn't have all the right markings, etc. So a lot of it comes down to educating our society as well. And it's all, you know, it's the responsibility of everybody in the room. Not only government and private sector leaders are at the top there, but day to day, just making sure that your community understand there's a reason why there's an expiry, you know, on a particular piece of food. There's a reason why there's a cold chain and a link in a cold chain from a logistics perspective that need to be in place so that, you know, food does not become toxic, etc. So, yeah, I don't want to preach, but the reality of the matter is that the challenge that you are raising is a very complex multi-stakeholder challenge, and I don't think we can put the finger and point the finger to one single party and say the blame lays there and this is where we need to fix it. It will take a concerted effort of the whole society to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin, for rescuing the day. Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of our discussion. Thank you so much for your attention and thank you so much for your participation. I think the most important or key takeaways from this discussion is that greater collaboration is indeed a good recipe for us to win. You know, we need to have a greater understanding of the distinct nature of the government agencies as stakeholders. Obviously, investment in property and capacity building in terms of information dissemination. It may take a bit of time, but we will get there. Thank you so much, and thank you to the panels.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, another huge round of applause for Ms. Olga Twala. I think she's done an excellent job moderating the session. Also, a huge thank you to Mr. Lunga Malloy for his insights, #Lunga for President. Unita, that was a great suggestion. I think he gave us practical insights. And Martin Cameron, I almost felt like I was in a lecture receiving the pearls of wisdom you've shared with us in terms of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, as well as the alignment on the non-tariff barriers. You touched on a shared responsibility. You touched on also at the macro level, Lunga, you spoke of the 150 to 200 billion loss on the simple economy. I think it was in the mineral sector. And I think the key for us is that every single product that we find on our shelves is dependent on the logistics network. So if we do not have an intact logistics network, and if we do not work together, we will be in a serious problem. I remember Olga looked at me and she says, Devin, can I wrap up? And I said, yes, lawyers are expensive. You can wrap up so we get some time back. I'm the only one standing between yourself and a comfort break as we move it a little ahead of time. But before I allow you to take your comfort break, there's a lot of power in a name, right? And if you would work with me on this, let's think about it. Government of national unity. National unity. Has the two parties that have collaborated, have they been separated? Yes, there's been issues. I think in 2023, especially on the logistics network, we had more issues than Vogue and Cosmopolitan combined. But we got through those issues and we came up with solutions to move the logistics network forward. So I think about four ways. Anyone from four ways? Anyone experience the traffic in four ways? It's always a four-way stop. So there's power in a name. All right, so on that, let's not call it non-tariff barriers, but let's call it non-tariff solutions so that we can marry the tariff elimination with the eradication of the non-tariff barriers. As you've mentioned, Martin and Lunga, there's a lot that needs to be done. It's very diverse. Government functions through many layers at a macro, at a micro level as well in terms of policy application. Charles, you spoke of the skills development as well. On the other side of this, we have a powerful panel discussion. So you do not want to miss that. Please enjoy the comfort break. We will see you again at 11. Thank you. You need to say 11. You need to say 11, and then we can play the video when we come back and then go into the panel discussion so that we start at 11:30. Just one second. Okay.
Oh, totally. Ditch. Ditch 1, 2.
Oh, maar ik denk dat die begin. Iets gebeuren. Ze moeten hier naar buiten. Iets gebeurd, maar. Die overstaan en die Oh no. Oh, sorry. This. Die daarna speelt dat bij aan het ja, als je het
Oké, maar dan gaan staan daar. Gaan staan daar, dan staan ik er. Gaan staan daar, ik zie hem staan.
Son comme le bonheur, il tombe de la joie, ou bien des chagrins, affaibli par la pluie. Je vois car rien n'est gratuit dans la vie. L'espoir est un navire pour vite consommer. À sauter les repas, je suis habitué. Un bonheur solitaire et triste à nourrir. Ah, je suis amer, j'en pourrais assez, car rien n'est gratuit dans la vie. Je t'aime, aux étoiles, ça n'est pas pour moi. Ça va se trouver, et pas le monde. Je dresse la table de ma nouvelle vie. Je suis heureux à l'idée de ce nouveau destin. Une vie à me cacher et puis vivre. Destin est sur mon chemin. Une vie à me cacher. Destin est sur mon chemin.
Niet te zien wanneer precies een eindpunt begint. Ja, en dan door natuurlijk. En dan door natuurlijk ons. Ja. Ja. Sabe assim, mas não se estoura. Você entenderia? Tá.
If I should stay, I would only be in your way. So I'll go, but I know I'll think of you every step of the way. And bittersweet memory, that is all I'm taking with me. So goodbye. Don't cry. We both know I'm not what you need. And I will love you. People treat you right, and I hope you have all you dreamed of. And I wish for you joy and happiness. But above all this, I wish you love. And it's past colors and promises. How to be brave? How can I love when I'm afraid to fall? But watching you stand alone, all of my doubt suddenly goes away. So stand. I wait. Darling, don't be afraid. I have loved for a long time. I love you. I stand still, beauty no see. If I will be brave, I will not let anything take away what's standing in front of me. breath. Every hour has come to thee. I have died every day waiting for darling, don't be afraid. I'll love you for 1,000 years. Deep down would find you. Time has brought your heart to me. I've loved you for 1,000 years. I love you for 1,000 years. Be waiting for you. Darling, don't be afraid. I have loved you for 1,000 years. I love you for 1,000. And all alone, I believed I would find you. Time has brought your heart to me. I have loved you for 1,000 years. I love you for 1,000.
There you go. I think it helps to switch the mic on. Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask please that you take your seats as we are about to start in a minute. So 60 seconds to find your seat and we will commence shortly. 9 to 5, a live outside broadcast this afternoon. You heard the cover version of Christina Perry's 1,000 Years, as well as Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. And that is indeed the love we have for the Logistics Network. So keep it locked down to 9 to 5 as we keep you entertained, laughing and smiling throughout the afternoon. We're in for a power-packed panel discussion as we navigate the complexities of the supply chain, as we navigate towards success through the Government of National Unity. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I can ask, please, that you take your seats as we are about to start. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can increase the volume, and those of us that are outside will obviously join us in a moment. I can see that there's a few people at the back. Please, if you can take your seats, that we can commence. I believe Harry is coming around as well. For those of you that have already taken your seats, let me just share a quick story with you, talking about marriage, right? And we're talking about a marriage of convenience, a marriage of choice, and of course, the government of national unity, the marriage of private and public sector. I've got a relative, and he's been married for 25 years. So he says to his wife, should we try Greece for our anniversary? And she responds, no, we'll stick to Vaseline. Blue seal. All right, as we wait for the guests to arrive, I think maybe I can throw this one in. Any customs experts in the house? I look around, there's a lot of customs experts. Okay, I'm gonna give you a quick product, and you're going to give me a classification on it, right? Why? All right, so the product, guys, or it's actually a product for the ladies. It's tampons that are being imported for a national brand. Okay, anyone knows the HS code? Maybe not your vertical. Tampons. Yes. 9619. 00. Maybe, but now we've got a problem because SARS disagrees. They stopped the consignment for a physical inspection, and they found that there were bells attached to tampons. And then we needed to submit a tariff determination. So you may be thinking, what is this lost copy talking about bells being attached to the tampons? Apparently, it's going to be used for the Christmas period. Okay, that was a bad one. I do apologize. All right. Since we don't have load shedding, we're kind of shocked. But let's get back into the program. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel discussion has 4 prominent speakers, and it is centered around the logistics network overview, the holdup with the public sector or private sector participation and ports. I know this isn't Texas, but there's definitely a holdup. We're going to find out why. And we're going to look at how we foster intra and interport competition, look at the logistics roadmap, and unlock greater efficiency and sustainability. Our first speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is rumored to have sold all of the ice in the North Pole to the Eskimos. An excellent salesperson, biography available on LinkedIn. Please join me with a huge round of applause as we welcome Theo Papas, the Area Head of Sales, Southern Africa and Indian Ocean Islands at AP Moller Maersk. You can see he didn't get the tan because he was in the North Pole selling ice to the Eskimos. Thank you very much, Theo. He went to Greece. All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Theo, for that. Our next speaker, okay, I think, Theo, since you represent Maersk, we'll keep you at Tower 205. Berthing alongside you, we have anything that a man can do, a woman can do better. Ladies agree? So our next panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is an experienced director giving you direction better than Google Maps and Garmin 2.0. A huge round of applause for the director of the Mediterranean Shipping Company, Ms. Inocentia Matao. You could see that she's got the memo in terms of the black and white dress code. This is phenomenal. Competitors shaking hands, vessels berth alongside each other, 203 and 205. I think MSC has dedicated berthing. Maersk, you can advise us if you've got the same. On that point, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get to our next speaker. He is, for those of you that can decipher the clues to the cryptic, an excellent architect of the rail reform. And he is directly feeding into OV, Operation Vulindlela, reporting into the presidency, representing government, the Department of Transport representative, Mr. Jaap van der Merwe. A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. This is turning out to be quite exciting. We've got government in the room with private sector, sharing the same stage. Ladies and gentlemen, as employees, we have rights. And our next speaker, he's joining us in person, is a speaker that advocates for the rights and obviously to work closely with business. Again, really a miraculous manifestation unfolding before your very eyes. Please put your hands together for Mr. Cobus van Vuren, the Secretary General for UNTU. That's the United National Transport Union. Cobus, we've seen many memos from you, and we've planned accordingly. Thank you very much, Cobus. And ladies and gentlemen, then introducing our moderator. She's running up. I didn't even get to say my part about you, Unit. Okay, so I said captain of industry quite a lot, but definitely beauty and brains combined, a passionate servant of SA Inc., leading our country toward a direction of progress through stitching the supply chain one seam at a time. A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our power-packed panel. It promises to entertain you, inform you, and liberate us from inefficiencies in the logistics network.
Is it easier? I'm standing before you and lunch and the nice conversations, and we're going to delight your life in an hour's time or during this next hour. But I think you haven't seen this on a stage. So just take a moment. It's 2 shipping lines, it's the Department of Transport, and it's labor. So maybe you must take a picture because I don't think you will see it in your life again. Maybe, Cobus, do you agree? Yep, I don't know, DOT. Miracles happen. In Essentia, have you been ever on a panelist like that? A couple of times with labor and... Yes, and then Theo as well. Thank you very much. So I divided my questions in 3 topics, and I want to take you through that. So the first one is, how do we view the logistics network in South Africa? And specific questions to ask them. Then I'm going to go to the private sector participation model. What do they think we can learn from it? And lastly, I'm going to wrap up to see then what is the best practice and what can we do, and what is the social compact and how can we foster inter and intra-port competition. If you can remember, that was the thumb in Devlin's analysis earlier this morning. So my first question, if I can go, what is the key challenges and opportunities in the South Africa logistics network? If you can think around that. And then maybe also bring in the master plans and how do you think it can be unfold or unfold in our supply chain? So, Jaap, can I give you the first slot to go, and then we will go from there on. Thank you. I think it is on. Yeah.
Thank you, Anita. I don't work for the DOT. I'm the gunslinger from private sector that helps DOT. So the challenge we have with our logistics sector is not a new problem. We live in a very expensive logistics country because we all live in the middle and the ports are far away. So we have a built-in cost of transport that's different from, say, Australia, where everybody lives within 50 kilometers from the sea. The big problem we have is over the years, our cost of logistics has been creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. And we have a difficulty to keep it down. We have now achieved to move everything from rail to road that we could, and that makes it even worse. So our ports are not effective, but you have to look hinterland as well. So overall, the system needs a reset, redesign, and it really manifests in what we wrote in the logistics roadmap to separate the utilities, such as the port authority and the rail network, and for that matter, the pipeline, from the operations, leave them with the state, and let we sort of a Sunroll type model take hold, which seems to be conducive to introduce competition. So really the monopoly is being, it has run its course, Juanita. Thank you.
I'm going to switch on my, yes, it's working. We can have an active discussion, so I don't want just to go according to the script and the questions. What do you think of what Jaap was saying in terms of the vertical separation? Do you think Labour think it's a good concept, or would you want to consolidate all the activities?
Well, from UNTU's side, we definitely do not believe that the vertical separation is a practical move. We understand the concept of unbundling and creating let's call it division competition. But we're not in favor of that. Because if you go into the detail around the trim and T-frock separation, yes, there's going to be PSPs, and those PSP participation is going to have a direct impact on Transnet and the employees within Transnet. So we are not in favor of that. We do agree that our logistics system needs a reset, a complete redo, but we're not in favor of trim and T-frock as a result of the impact that it will have in the long run on the current employment within the Transnet trim and T-frock people.
But can I ask you, what would your suggestion be? What would your ideal picture be of the logistics network?
I think I'll get to the answers on how we can resolve all of those issues when we get to the last point.
Okay.
And I'll give you practical examples and the detail around it. Once I provide you with the detail around the last point that you mentioned, you would understand what is our challenges, firstly. And once we overcome those challenges, the problem will solve itself.
Thank you very much. Then Theo, I'm going to come to you because you work around the world. I think there's a feedback, that's fine.
Yep.
You work around the world and you've got your own terminals as well. What's the view that you say? And I don't want to come to the interport competition, much more now. And what do you think our country needs?
Thanks, Vanita. If I may just open, we heard all the sponsors with their stance earlier. The reality is there's a very nice book called 90% of Everything. So the two of us here are actually responsible for moving cargo. So before it gets to all the sponsors. So yeah, shipping is responsible for moving pretty much 90% of everything. If I can touch on opportunities, I think, Vanessa, I think from a shipping perspective, we know that we can see generally African countries, but more so the Southern African countries are a lot more resilient to what's happening in the bigger part of the world, the big east-west trades. And I think the opportunity is that South Africa in particular is fairly resilient to what's happening around the world, and there's opportunity for growth. Our challenges are well documented. We know we're struggling with a failing infrastructure, but more so post-COVID, and I could probably lean on Innocentia here, there is more of a willingness for business to come together to find solutions and bring together. I think everyone knows every company has to make money or profit in whatever business they're doing, but there is a bigger view of how do we help things get better. And I'll touch a little bit on it on how we do that, but I think there is a clear appetite for business around the world, that Africa is a market where we want to grow in, and are willing to invest in infrastructure here in South Africa. And that can take a number of different views. I'm sure we'll touch on it as we go.
Innocentia, I think if I look at the last stats, MSC is controlling a fifth of the world's trade. Yes. So what would your view be in terms of the key challenges and the opportunities for our logistics network?
So thank you firstly to SAF and the organizers for letting us come to the stage and actually share key things that make us not sleep at night, and we're just not resolving them as quick as we should be. So well done. I've been in the shipping industry, and I'm actually representing, I'm not here in my capacity as MSC per se, I'm here as an economist, as a maritime economist who has opinions. And I've been with MSC for 14 years now, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Meaning I've seen the good that South Africa has done at some point with the same sort of equipment they had and the people they had. I've seen it fade in the air, and I've seen what's happening now. And I think we're losing on a big opportunities because we're just not getting together as industry enough to actually confront the issues. Government, now and again, I find that we need to indulge them and educate them more so that they can actually come to the party on the actual issues that the shipping industry is facing. We are about efficiency and we understand that efficiency is expensive. We need to invest in efficiency. In the last 7 years, we stopped investing in efficiency. Our maintenance regimes are are sort of non-existent. We work 8 to 5 as a country in fixing our equipment. The rolling stock is coming very slowly. When I joined the shipping industry, every 6 weeks I was hearing when equipment will be delivered. Those conversations have stopped completely. We're not hearing them. At least recently with the new leadership, we're starting to hear some progress. And we're a complementary port system in South Africa. What an opportunity. I first went to Geneva in 2010, and the chairman and president of MSC said, you guys are so fortunate in South Africa to have government owning the port and the rail. What a unique model, because you can control the operations, you can control the growth, making sure the verticals are balanced. You are a one-stop shop, and we can't lose that. We are a complementary system of ports, and you must maintain it that way and stay competitive to the world. And obviously, I've got opinions with why we must create a private monopoly, which I think it's a baby born wrong. And I think you will facilitate that conversation and we can unpack it better as to where we see it work or where it won't work. PSPs are encouraged, but it's about how we structure them. And the port must always remember, efficiency is expensive. We're willing to pay for it. However, we need the efficiency, but we need to be competitive at the same time. And the price of doing business can be high. And we need to think about it when we form these partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you as audience can see there's different angles or there's different viewpoints in how do we correct our port environment. But I want to encourage you because I know we're going to continue to the next round of questions and then answers. But I think we as South Africans must take the lessons learned what we've seen today is that Jaap can differ from Kobus and Kobus can state his points why he differ. Then Ms. can let us understand what is the broader picture. And then in a sense, I can come back to a maritime and say, well, this is maybe what we work. And I want to encourage you when we leave here because we cultivate that because that's make us as South Africans strong. I think we forget how to dialogue with each other and to hear what we can say. And we need to take it, if we're serious about our logistics network, which we are, we need to have these robust discussions and take it forward. So now we come to the hamburger and then always it start and then you have the meat and then we come to the last one. So I think let me unpack PSPs because sometimes we as business love the private sector participations. We understand labor doesn't really want to endorse that because they believe it's going to be job sharing along the line. And we need to grow because I think our gentleman from the previous session was make it very clear that on the townships, how do we grow? And Martin was also touching on that. So I'm going to get Ms., maybe not because it's we want to focus on a high level. What is your view on the private sector participation? And what do you think we need to take as building blocks to make it work? So I can ask you too.
Obviously, I think as business, we're pro private sector partnership with governments, and we've seen it work in our business across the world, and in Africa in particular, and we even have some dealings with my colleague here to the left in Africa. I think we had the example earlier of the middle finger. You can't pull those two away from each other. And you need it in order to work. Because there's probably a lot more funding that is accessible to business than there is to government, and government probably has a number of other priorities to focus on. If we bring it closer to home, I think we have an education and a medical sort of sector that's probably needing significant amount of funding, and obviously we have the crime element as well. We know it's one of the priorities. So could funds be better spent there and allowing public privatization to run or manage the network, yes, we're pro that. And I just want to give some examples of, there's a lot of articles that criticize, let's call it the shipping sector for orchestrating congestion and creating sort of demand. And just to share some narrative, and these numbers are out there. If we look at time charter rates, they're significantly high. They can stem from $20,000 to $70,000 a day to charter a ship. And for every day you wait longer in a port, that pushes up a rate. Ships are meant to be sailing, and they're meant to be connecting countries to each other. So every day you wait longer in the terminal, you just add costs. And the reality is the end customer, myself, all of us in the room end up paying that cost. So we touched on inefficiencies. We're all about inefficiencies. The quicker we work, the quicker we're able to get in a safe working environment. Obviously, there's the labor aspect to it. The lower the unit cost is, you can bring in bigger ships. And does that unlock opportunities? Does it create more entrepreneurs to get product in and out of the country? Yes, and it's for that sole reason that we're pro public sector privatization. Let the people that know how to do it, do it.
Kobus, I'm going to ask you, before I go to your Center, what is your ideal picture, and how do you think we need to mature in this social compact?
I think I want to create context first. All right. So it's very good that we've got all these wonderful ideas of private sector participation. Not that Labour is in favor of it, but how did we end up at this point where there is no other way out, basically? It's as simple as underinvestment in our infrastructure for the last 10, 15 years. We have not invested in our infrastructure. And if you will allow me, if the House would allow me, I'll share some stats with them that I got this morning. So we've
Mike, so you can.
Yeah, well, thank you. So we've underinvested in our infrastructure, deliberately or not deliberately. It remains to be proven. Over the last 15 years, our rail infrastructure is dilapidated. Our road infrastructure is dilapidated as a result of underinvestment. What has also happened? Government debt to GDP to debt ratio has increased to 75 to 80%. That means that there is no money from government because of whatever, state capture and whatever else the money was used for. Transnet cannot access any further money to invest in the infrastructure because they are incapacitated on that, basically. 160 billion rand assets valued at 61 billion recently. So they're over-indebted. So there is basically, Transnet has painted itself into a corner, infrastructure government has painted itself in a corner, where this whole narrative of we have to be saved has now been pushed forward. So I want to touch on the TFR, trim and TFROC side. What would happen? So initially, Transnet Infrastructure Manager and Transnet Freight Rail Operation would be separated into divisions, and the plan is to then make Trim a separate company. All right, that separate company will then allocate PSPs or slots on the rails. Now here's the challenge. Because of the dilapidated rail infrastructure, where we could have usually run 10 trains up to Richards Bay or Saldanha and 10 trains down, now we can only run 5. Why? Because the infrastructure is dilapidated. Recently we went on a TFR, we accompanied the TFR operations guys. 55,000 manual authorizations had to be done in 1 month. The month before that, 77,000. The month before that, 105,000. Manual authorizations. It's like robots. So you can imagine if you have to stop at 55,000 robots on your way to work. That's going to take some time. It's going to completely affect your efficiencies. So we could have run 10 trains a day up, 10 trains down. We can now run only 5 because of the infrastructure that is dilapidated. We can't fix the infrastructure because neither government or Transnet has money. Now, what will happen is if Trim and TFROC is separated as different companies, Trim is going to allocate slots. The pricing has not even been determined yet. And we know Transnet being a big company, the cost of operation is much higher than smaller private companies. So when PSPs are then allocated, there's only 5 slots available, as an example. Now the slot is allocated to a private strategic partner. That means that there's only 4 slots available for Transnet. That directly means that Transnet is going to need 1/5 less people because they don't have that slot anymore. That's on the TFR side. So on the ports, let me share some.
Because you touched an important point, and we do education as well. I want to bring, before you go to the ports, I want to bring in Jaap here on the slots. Jaap, currently, you know, as I do, and Kobus probably would know that as well, in the audience, we had 48 slots on the Natcor line. That means we can run 100 trains in both directions, from Durban to Gauteng on a daily basis. Currently, we have 19 slots, and we're working to that. So my belief, I hear what you're saying, but I think if we fix our infrastructure, there will be enough slots for more people and maybe for Transnet also more than what we currently have. Is my theory incorrect, Jaap? What will you correct?
No, you're right. I think just to correct the perception, access to the network is not a PSP, becomes a right. So,
Or the application?
yeah, buying a slot is not a PSP. It's like you paying toll at the toll gate. The PSP is to fix the network. So what we need is we need money into the infrastructure, and that's where the PSP will take place. The slot is not a PSP. The slot is a simple access mechanism. So when we talk about PSPs, it's getting parties to invest in fixed infrastructure on the network side. In a way, they can get their return back, so we can get back to the 47 slots a day in each direction on the Natcor. Currently, we're running 10 a day. But if you analyze and go back, when Transnet had full control over it, and we go back many years, 2010, they had 16 slots in operation. So it's not a new thing that they underutilized the network. That Natcor ran 16 slots a day in 2010. We're now went down to 4, we're back to 10. So it is clear and obvious that in 14 years, Transnet couldn't figure out how to use the network they have. Now, you can't have a hotel with 47 rooms and you're only selling 10 of it every month. That's how you go bankrupt. So over time, we stop maintaining it. And he's absolutely right, Kobus. We sit with the situation that we have with Eskom. Are we going to go to the PIC and ask the state pension employees to again bail out bad management? We put 200 billion into Eskom of the government employees pension fund. I'm sure when those guys go on retirement, I hope Eskom is still working. So that's not a smart model. But what we have in the logistics sector is we have very interested parties that would play. And we haven't even scratched the surface internationally. What we have is a very concentrated market. We have 4 or 5 guys running iron ore. We have 10 or 12 companies doing manganese. We have 3 or 4 shipping lines running all the containers. Very concentrated market. They are deeply invested in the efficiency or inefficiency of the logistics system, road and rail. To the point when we had the spike in the Ukraine and the coal price went from $80 to $480. Everybody suddenly was a trader in coal. They couldn't get onto rail. The rail went down from 70-odd million tons to 49. And then everybody tried to put it on a truck. And we got exactly 21 million tons missing, of which 5 got out. But we destroyed the N2 in the process, north of Richards Bay. So the notion that as long as one ship takes 10 trains and each train takes 100 wagons, you can't break that Russian doll. And in the moment, we have a problem in the middle, and that messes up upstream, and it messes up downstream. So we are unfortunately in a situation where we cannot afford the luxury of an integrated monopoly. The country can't. You know, so if you want your children to be poor, carry on the way you do. And there will be struggles in this. This is not a perfect system. We're figuring it out as we go. 250,000 manual train authorizations monthly. I've got detailed maps going back 7 years. It's not a new thing. You know, why have a signaling system if you manually authorize your trains? But that requires a few billion in signaling to be put in. The coal line signaling was last put in 1976. They haven't changed it yet. You know, who still owns a cell phone or a telephone or a TV from 1976? Who owns a car from 48 years old? That's the age of our locos, except a few. They're 9 years old. Nobody even drives 9-year-old cars. So we're stuck in this problem of having to raise capital. And what we need to do is not completely sell the family jewels in the process. So if you really analyze the system, the network component is the one thing the country can't get rid of. It's got real estate, it's got land title to it. You know, if the road works, the traffic will come. Sanral has proven it over and over again with the en-routes. If the road is good, the traffic will come. So we need to get to that point. And Treasury is not interested, private sector, or the banks are not interested, government doesn't have the money. So the only alternative we now have is to get creative and find a sort of a least regret approach to recapitalize the system. And that is where we are. We have no choice about this. It's that, or we will continue with this logistics blackout that we are experiencing. Ask Jan Havenga in 2010, what is the definition of a logistics blackout? And he said, 25 Rand a liter diesel. That's in 2010 money. We're already at 21 Rand a liter diesel. But it doesn't look like an Eskom blackout where it's instant. But you see it in prices of food, you see it in supplies, you see it in displacements of products. It creeps up on you very slowly. How big must the crisis be before we start fixing it, you know? When we had the meeting with the president, he says, I called it the National Logistics Crisis Committee. It's not National Business as Usual Committee. We're in a crisis. And a crisis requires hard decisions with the least regret to get the system going again. Thank you.
Thank you. In a sense, yeah, you in Tower 203. I think so. I'm going to come back to Cobus, but you in Tower 203. So what Devlin said, so I'm going to ask you on that. Cobus said, it feels to him that there's no other way out. Yeah. The private sector must come in and assist. Jaap touched very much on that. Yes, we split it. There's vertical separation, there's the infrastructure, there's trim, there's in the operating companies. It sounds to us good. But what would you think? Is that a creative way, or would you think differently about it as a maritime economic?
And yeah, so our thinking is generally pragmatic, and I'll give examples in me giving you a view of what I think. So 7 years ago, we had 124 straddle carriers working. So we need 4 per container. You have decent fluidity. It will give you about 22 moves an hour. We are now at 50 straddles at the port of Durban. They've ordered 20. They're getting delivered, I think, in early December, early next year. But they're still going to bring the count to about 55. We're still not at that 124 that we need fluidity to get our port efficient. So we are in the pits. We're not getting even better. We're making baby decisions. And what I'll commend TPT doing is the private sector participation. But are they doing it cleverly? Because we need a short-term solution. We need a medium-term solution. And we need a long-term solution. What they've settled for, it's a court case as we speak. It's going to take time for it to be, solved. But, the season's coming. We're getting the grape coming. We're getting the citrus coming. Are we going to wait for the court to get resolved? No. Then the creative solutions that my colleague on stage are talking about is about collaborating differently. The ports, Transnet doesn't have money. Shipping lines, port users, private sector have money. We pay tariffs to Transnet. Can't we help Transnet in the short term take money from our tariffs that we're going to pay anyway? PSPs, must be about helping with efficiency, reducing the cost of doing business, using existing financial instruments to help the port, and also attract volumes. We have volumes. As he said, we're the top 2 worldwide. We control the tap, but we need the efficiency. But when I help you get the efficiency right so that we can get the vibrancy going and we can be that gateway. You privatize wrongly, THCs are going to be exported to other countries and they're not going to stay here. The operator will just be wanting his IRR and that's it. But we're not closing on that door. We're just saying, let's be more creative. It's about the equipment that the people. During the storm, I'll give you an example again. We got VSPs. The last leadership of Transnet pushed VSP, people left. We didn't have staff to man the cranes, and we called them back, and they said, yes, we are ready to man those ships. Give us 15 days training, and we'll help the port. Shipping lines volunteered to, cover the costs, because Transnet said they couldn't afford them, but they allowed them to come in. There's solutions, but where's the will? There's a way. Sometimes I feel the will is just not there. But I just want short and medium-term solutions. We're too far there, and we're not going to get any change anytime soon if we don't become bold. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I will come back to Kobus, but let's see if we have 1 or 2 questions, and then I'm going to come to the last section. If Harry can help me, is there 1 or 2 questions from the audience? Well, I hope it's that you consent to the discussion that we have, or maybe you think we must ask more difficult questions. I see heads are nodding, so there's no questions. Oh, there's one at the back. Otherwise, we will go to the last one.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A quick one. I heard that you said Transnet doesn't have money, but each and everything, like our economy is driven by logistics. Hence, we have to invest more into logistics for our GDP to grow up. Investing into our infrastructures, we need to put an effort into all those things because as an economy as a whole, logistics is the primary strategic what do you call this?
Enabler, if I can help you.
Sorry. Enabler. So we need to invest more, and something else. There are a lot of people into official governments that they don't even have an idea about international trade, but they are there equipping all the positions without knowledge of what's happening into our economy. Thank you. And then Michelle.
Thank you. Harry, there's one at the back there, and then we will go. Oh, there's one as well there. Before you go, there's a question there, Harry. Oh.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I just need to echo what Innocentia was saying regarding the issue of TPT and TPR.
Maybe Kamoto, can you just introduce yourself? You're the chair of the Freight Logistics South Africa. Maybe that the audience know.
Oh, thank you very much, because I see people I know. I thought everybody knows me. My name is Kumozo Mohale, serving as the president for the Freight Logistics South Africa Association. Thank you. I just needed to take this and echo it, particularly as a concern, but also drive this as a topic of agenda to the National Logistics Crisis Committee. Why is it that? Because every time you try to engage with TPT, with TFR, they will always cite the issue of a budget. We don't have money. But these guys have a greater responsibility because, as you know, we say that transport is the heartbeat of the economy. They've got greater responsibility. Now that the DPE, the department is out and Transnet is under the Department of Transport, may I push it now to the to the chairperson now, so that this thing should be discussed, because it does not happen that in a country that has got such a problem to the point that the president started the National Logistics Crisis Committee, and then we are still being faced with the same thing. But I also want to push that if the private sector could assist, like in the case of what Innocentia is saying, let them be allowed. Let them be. Let the private sector invest, so that we should have port efficiency. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask my panelists. I'll summarize it. I think the first one, if I can ask, and I'm going to go to Theo, because when he works with the government quite extensively in transit now, do you think there is a strategic alignment in government to understand what the logistics network is doing? I can go that. Then I'm going to ask Jaap, if you can answer the question from Gamotsu, is that, yes, we understand TNPA and TPT don't have budget, but I think you have exciting news on the, and I know you're not for the DOT advisory, but there may be a way out, if I can put it in a different way, in the PSP structure. And then, Kobus, if I can come lastly to you, from your point of view on labor, is that the one point was also there should be a responsibility above the budget. It's right, but I think you contextualize it so nicely, is there no other way? And I want to come back to that point, because I think you do have a solution for us with that. So is that fine for you then, Jaap, and then I come to you, Kobus. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's always a tricky one when we have questions if government know about logistics. I think from what we can see, and post the recent elections and the GNU, you don't really have to know much, but you have to know how to get a team that can tell you on the way forward. And from what we can see on the private sector, there is a clear drive for government to collaborate and understand what the pain points are, what the dynamics are, and how to make things move. And they are leaning on individuals, if I can use Jaap as an example, to help paint the picture and to help understand how do we change the operating environment. So there is a clear change in stance. There's almost like a morale boost brewing on the ground that we want to understand, we want to work, and we want to fix things. So I guess similar to any leader, you don't have to know how to do the work. You just need to know how to get the right people to do the work. And we're seeing that from government at the moment. I've been with Maersk for 16 years. I don't think I've ever had more meetings with government in the last 2 years than I have ever in my career. So there is definitely a move. And I think Transnet themselves have realized they also need to step up. And I know we're saying TPT and TFR don't really want to collaborate. I'm seeing a different picture. There is a definite need and a will. You could phone any managing executive now and they will help you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Can I come to you, Jaap? Maybe some exciting news to address that?
Yeah, thank you, Anita. I think I want to make the point that Transnet's a company. We've given it the obligation, and I've been in it from 1981, so I know the business. Most of you weren't born those years. You cannot expect of a company to take on the responsibility of a country. That's why we have governments and companies. Eventually, it will run out. In 1992, it already ran out. And this is, to me, this is the second rodeo. We went through this process in 1992. There was no money. There was infrastructure was dilapidated. Ian will remember. And we had to fix this business through processes and technologies and squeeze the lemon. So this is just more of the same 30 years later. I haven't solved the problem. And Juanita, forgive me, but I have to say this. I hate the word challenges. Challenge means nothing to me. I understand problems that needs a solution. I understand puzzles that you can complete because you know the picture. I understand a mess. A mess is when there are so many problems, you can't solve them, so you have a new design. So the reform program deals with a mess. We addressed with the corridor recovery teams, we addressed continuous improvement activities. Transnet was heading for 138 million tons. We pulled it back to 151. We invented by simply talking to each other, no money. Private sector and a company in the same meeting with the good people on the ground, giving them recognition, listening to them in an open forum. And we still do that. We invented an 11 million ton railway out of fresh air. That's 6 times, that's the largest that Zimbabwe ever was 12. No one else on the continent's ever done that except South Africa. So we also have to be honest with ourselves. Collaboration and communication get you only so far. That's why we're stuck at 156 now, or maybe 165. So to get to the point that Khomotso alluded to, when you restructure and re-architect, you must be very careful what you do. So we take a South Africa Inc. view first at the supply chain level. We are known for manganese supply chains, dominant in the world. Chrome supply chains, dominant in the world. Iron ore supply chain, Mickey Mouse, but fancy product. Containers, most expensive supply chain in the world, but very important. If we are obsessed with counting tons, so the minister has asked us to get to 250 million tons by June 2029. But if you look at the intermodal, the high-value goods business, 10x in value. So for every rand that a ton is worth to the economy, it's 10 rand that manufactured goods are worth. Most of them are in boxes or on trucks, in curtain siders. So we need to take a South Africa Inc. view. So when we talk about, for instance, the intermodal PSP, you start by saying, what is this spinnerock, this thing in the country, this network that will make South Africa do what it needs to do on a manufactured goods business? That's probably not one PSP, but you have to architect at that level. If you're going to bring all the manganese down to Nelson Mandela Bay, then there's no place for the Ford cars and the Volkswagens to drive up and down without doubling the line between Noupert and P. Good luck building through those mountains a new railway line. $6 million per kilometer is the average price now in South Africa, in Africa, for railways. So very, very expensive. So we need to take this whole step out and say, what is the architecture of what we need to solve for? The first step, does it tick SA Inc. as a competitive country at a supply chain level? No matter the price that we have to pay internally, if we can't do that, we're not a competitive economy. Once we've taken that decision, then we denormalize for pragmatic issues. Can we use what we have? How's the best way to structure for it? So we are there now, and we have a lot of pressure from the minister to start talking formally to the market to make sure we understand we're solving the right problems. No point going out there and asking for PSP in a knee-jerk reaction, spending 2 years to get the money in, and then end up solving the wrong problem. Also, be under no illusion. A PSP from today to financial close, 24 months, if you're lucky. So what do we do in the meantime? We know the coal line is broken. We know the Natal main line is broken. We know the iron ore line is broken. So we are busy with processes to put bridge finance in from the private sector, because the state doesn't have the wherewithal to put that money in now, and somehow tie that back into this future investment. So there's a very complex problem we're trying to solve. And in the end, the test is whether we achieve the apex KPIs of efficiency, efficacy, cost optimization. You know, we've spent a lot of time with the unions in the development of the roadmap. Under 200 million tons of rail traffic. Don't ask me how this works. The ratio of jobs to population is shrinking. In other words, people are getting poorer. So if you look at the population growth and you look at the jobs growth, under 200 million tons, we are getting more people, less jobs and more people. Once you hit the magic 200 million tons on the rail, the economy, that indicator, gives you that positive growth of jobs to population. We have no choice in this. 2029, June, December, whatever, is the delivery date for the National Development Plan, the NDP, with fancy GNU indexes and things. From a base of 2021, we'll have to, if we pull it off, we can get to 20% growth in jobs to population. That's a good story. Might be painful now for a while, but it's a good story. So, you know, we really just have to face the music. Many reasons why we are where we are. Many of them I don't agree with. And many people got hurt in the process. But I think we just have to show that pioneering culture in South Africa and our tolerance to each other. Just go out there and do it. But stop asking Transnet or any other SOE to solve the country's problem. The country must solve the country's problem, not the company. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Kobus, we can come to you because you're going to give us the way out.
How much time do I have? So, let me start off by saying, with reference to what you said, Jaap. So, it is very obvious, and it's been confirmed by this panel, that we've underinvested in our infrastructure and the money must come from somewhere. Okay? Labour's biggest concern is around job security. With an unemployment expanded rate of 43% in the country, we cannot afford to shed any more jobs. And history has taught us, and it's been proven over and over, when private business starts taking over a business, they are more efficient, they are more profit-driven. Job losses is a natural occurrence. And that is our biggest concern. We cannot shed any more jobs. The second part of that is that we cannot sell our state-owned assets to try and get out of this hole either. And if you look at DCT2, that's exactly what we were going to do, or what is happening. All of the assets within DCT2 would have been sold, and after 25 years, Transnet would have been given the opportunity to buy that back. So we can't sell our country's assets. Those are the two biggest reasons why we're against privatization. Now, when we get to the ports, as an example, lack again of investment in infrastructure. PE in Glucha, we need 2 pilot boats. We've got 1. All right? And I'm going to share some stats with you. Cape Town, as of today, this morning, we've got 31 RTGs. Okay, there's 19 that is not working. 19 out of 31. And we wonder why we are not achieving efficiencies. Kone cranes. There's 2 cranes booked in blocks K7 and K4. They're not operational. And we wonder why our efficiencies are not what it's supposed to be. Ship-to-shore cranes in Cape Town. We've got 3 ship-to-shore cranes out today, this morning. DCT2, Durban Container Terminal. We've got 48 straddles that is standing out of 88. More than half of the equipment is not functioning. Empty container handlers, we've got 12 in DCT2. There's only 6 that's working. I'll continue. There's
I'm ready to run the workshops for us in DCT.
All right, so just a couple of more, all right? In the one port, we've got 5 empty container handlers. There's 1 working. There is, in DCT1, we have got reach stackers. We've got 3. There's only 2 available. And we ask ourselves, And this is just two of the ports, and it's not even all the indicators. And we ask ourselves, why are we not reaching efficiencies? And the same can be said for TFR. 324 locomotives, non-operational. And we wonder why we can't reach efficiencies? We need to face reality. And the reality is, as a result of the lack of infrastructure investment, the age of the equipment that is way past their lifespan, the consistent breakdown of the machines is why we are where we are. That is the bottom line.
But
What is
we're looking for the silver line.
the solution is, and look, money has to come in from somewhere, but it needs to be spent in the right places, and it must be done at no expense to the country's assets, or the people of the country. I'll stop there.
No, you must give us one solution, because remember, it's the jobs, we can't sell our crown jewels, we don't have money. So give us a solution.
I think there's not one solution. I think there is a combination of a number of different solutions. And private sector, private business does have a role to play. But, like Job said as well, we can't expect the private sector and Transnet to fix the country. The government must fix the country. So they have also got a role to play. Private sector, Transnet, and government all has a role to play. And what is the bottom line? We need money. We need equipment that works and works efficiently. That is the problem. Do that, and the problem is solved.
In a sense, yeah. Will you give us the last word, because I see our time, because we need to stop?
Yeah.
Give us a word of wisdom, and then I will summarize.
100%, and he's right, it's complex. I'll tell you what we're talking about now. We're looking at a solution where shipping lines talk to each other to bring an unsolicited bid to government to say we've got working terminals with okay equipment, we can help. The government will be like, oh, no, we've got the PSP going on, there's a legal case, let's wait. What do we do? This is now for short term, but we're still pursuing it as MSC. And now we are speaking with our colleagues, Maersk, CMA, and the rest of them through SASOA. Secondly, can the workshops work 24 hours? We need jobs to fix the equipment that he said we have it. And you can't just go widely privatizing when you have all this equipment that are aged but still not maintained. We have solutions, and we just want the will from government to actually be less rigid in formalizing certain unsolicited concepts so that we have a short-term plan to fix our ports. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to summarize because my time's up. So I think, first of all, if I can take, we need to have a strong team to speak to government, and government needs to establish a strong team as well. So I think, Ian, you have listened to all of that, and I think that's what we do with our participation in the NLCC. But I think we will bolster that much more because we need to address it. Then definitely your efficiency, no doubt about it, in Essentia, you were very much on it, and Jaap also, because it comes in the freight logistics roadmap as well. Then repair and maintenance. We've got a plan from today. Kobus will run for us the workshops. We will second him into the workshops. Then I think, no doubt about it, we have to collaborate. Collaborate in a meaningful way and collaborate in a mature way. And I think we all agree, and I think it was you, somebody was saying, we can't do a PSP on a wrong way. We need to do a private sector participation model on the right way. And that requires from all of us to go back to the drawing board to say that we need it in the right way. And then, yeah, I will close with that, but that's maybe difficult for me because I'm a very proud South African. We're in a mess and we need a new design. But I think if you as audience agree with us, we're in a mess, but we're not going to put in our mind that we're in a mess. We're just going to foster to that we need a new design for the logistics network. And we're going to help each other to craft together this new design. So I don't know where's my MC. I'm going to stop here and let you give me a round of applause for this really
phenomenal panelists. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you would agree that was extremely informative. We are going to break for lunch shortly, but just net 2 minutes, alsjeblieft. Hang aan de tak. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do something quite special. I think not at all, Unita. I think if you can join us on stage, and if I can ask Mr. Ian Bird, as a representative of the NLCC, to join us, and Dr. Maria Dupree as well. I've got a special surprise. Basil, hierdie blou sag, net daar. Yeah, alsjeblieft. So in here, and can I get some champagne glasses as well? Because I think, Unita, let's face the reality. Jaap said to us that in terms of a mess, it's a multi-layer solution, right? And I want to take a moment, and please, audience, do indulge me. I'm just going to take the microphone off. I'm not going to drop it. Thank you very much. It's a bit heavy. I promise you, it's nothing dangerous. Maria, you're not going to be nervous. Yeah. So basically, I think Theo Papas, you said you just returned from Greece. Salve vergasto. So we appreciate the insights you've shared. In Essentia as well, you've given us phenomenal insights in terms of mobilization, private sector participation. And I think it's diverse. You've got labor that has a certain view, and Kobe is very strong in his view as well. Then you've got Jaap that gives you the insights into what has happened in 92. It's happening again now in 24. It's a repeat of that. It's lessons learned and how do we move forward. And then I think, again, not just because I work for the organization, I'm not being biased, but SAF as the host for this event today really plays a phenomenal role in stitching the supply chain. One may argue that, or if you have, it's about the maturity of mindset. If we do not do something now, we will not have a logistics network. There will be no duty and VAT to collect because cargo is not coming into the country. There will, in terms of balance of payments, we have the influx. With I think Jaap, you mentioned on the coal as an example, record prices. Everybody wants to jump onto the wagon. Excuse the pun, and we just couldn't get the product out. And so if we have an intact logistics network, Khamoto, you spoke about it, an earlier speaker, I didn't get the lady's name, but she spoke about, let's not just discuss it here. Each of us, if we place our hand over our hearts, we should hear the heartbeat or feel the heartbeat. If not, it's a problem. So similarly, if the logistics network collapses, our country is dead. And then it's for the future generation. Ons moet die volgende generasie voorberei om die leiers van môre te word. Juanita and almal what's on the stage at the moment, I'm going to try. My Afrikaans is nie so lekker nie, but it's getting better each year. But I'm going to try. Ons waardeer alles wat jy vir ons en vir die logistieke netwerk vir die voorsieningsketen doen. We really appreciate it. And in this bag, Ian, you're going to help me. We're going to have something really special. Hopefully it gets to the media as well, that labor and business is working together alongside a representative of government. Okay, I've got a proverbial bag of tricks. Thank you very much. I'm just going to grab in. Hopefully it's still here and hasn't disappeared. This has also flowed through the logistics network. It's a proudly South African product. And if we can get the champagne glasses, please, you can help me there. James, thank you very much. Die boodskap is duidelik en nie, dis is nie die champagne nie. We have work to do. And we're going to, Unita, again, now take my hats off to yourself, Maria, and the rest of the SAF team. It is cold, ice cold. And we're going to ask, Ian, maybe you could do you could do the honors. Because yes, it's something to celebrate. I think it's celebrated we work together. In 2021, we said we crawled. Absolutely, Nisa. I think, look, it's after 12, so I think you can indulge. In 2022, we began to walk. In 2023, we began to fly. And in 2024, or 23, we began to run. 24, we began to fly. There's power in the name. How many of you feel that 24 has been a long year? It has been, because it is 24/7, all right? So we were going to get that. Yeah, you can pop it. Let's capture this, ladies and gentlemen, a huge celebration and a round of applause for our delegates on stage that are really stitching the supply chain one seam at a time. Noot per noot, I believe here this is music to your ears. I'm going to try in a language that unifies the country. Niemand hening op die mond smeer, so I'm not trying to flatter anybody. Speaking from my heart, we really appreciate you guys. Ikwesa, iligliolo leniziwe. Ikamva likmomeke, quinto esenjayo namklanje. Our time is now. If it is to be, it is up to us. We're gonna toast. I think it's not champagne glasses, Kobe, so you can fill it to the top, Unita, if you don't mind. Sorry, Ian, you could go, yeah. Labor doesn't consume alcohol. On the other side of lunch, we're going to have a fun quiz, and I believe that we've got some competitive people. Brian was speaking earlier. His table is going to win. So if you want to join the winning table, okay, let's the sound of this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's cheers to collaboration, cohesiveness, and success in 2025. A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our captain of industry and her expert team serving South Africa selflessly. And we say thank you very much. All right, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to head into lunch. Before we do, remember the key message. I'm not the expert in terms of logistics, but I do know that each of us, I'm going to strike a match and I'm going to ignite a flame in you. We have to have a burning desire to fix the logistics network. All the best. You do have the burning desire. From our mouths to God's ears, let it be a success. Thank you. Thank you very much to Kobus, Jaap, Ian, Maria, Innocentia, Theo, and Unita. Ons waardeer, dankie, baie. I think we're done. I'm going to go into lunch. All right, we're going to go into lunch, ladies and gentlemen. Just to tell you what's on the buffet, we've got a meat option, we've got a veg option, and we've also got a seafood option. You can stand at the door and see the food. But before we do that, we want to say hambani kahle tot ziens to the viewers online that are joining us, because we're going to go into lunch now. We will try and courier some to you, but if not, those that are missing out, please be here next year in person to enjoy the meals. We'll see you on the other side of lunch. Thank you and God bless.
So, ladies and gents, lunch will be up to 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. We see each other here again, 1 o'clock. Ladies and gents, lunch is served in the gallery. So when you exit